Hi guys. Tonight we step quietly into a place where the air feels sharp enough to nip your nose the moment you breathe in. You stand at the edge of a winter frontier, boots sinking into powder that squeaks under your weight, moonlight turning every drift into a sheet of silver. Your breath drifts upward, soft and cloud-like, and for a moment you cannot help thinking you probably will not survive this if you are not careful. But that is why you are here. To learn how mountain men with nothing more than grit, a few tools, and an instinct for staying alive, built warm homes in conditions that look like they want to swallow you whole. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you settle into your blankets, tell me your location and your local time down in the comments. I always love seeing where you are listening from. Now, dim the lights. Let the warmth of your room contrast with the wilderness you are about to walk into, and let your mind glide forward into the story. You crunch across the frozen earth, each step a tiny drumbeat in the stillness. The shape of dawn is barely beginning to glow behind the mountains, a pale wash of icy blue spreading into the sky. Your fingers ache even inside warm gloves, which gives you a tiny taste of what early mountain men dealt with every single day. Imagine facing this kind of chill with mittens made of rough hide instead of modern insulation. One mainstream historical fact is that trappers in the early 19th century sometimes faced temperatures that dropped near 50 degrees below zero during deep winter. It was the kind of cold that made metal tools bite at your skin and caused exposed fingertips to stiffen in minutes. You keep moving, because standing still makes the cold slither deeper into your body. The trees around you stand stiff and silent, frost coating each branch and turning them into delicate sculptures. A quirky old tidbit comes back to you, something you once overheard a reenactor say at a historical fair. Some early woodsman insisted that if you listened closely at sunrise on the coldest mornings, you could hear the sap inside trees cracking with tiny pops, like nature's own popcorn. It sounds ridiculous, but as you stand here in the brittle stillness, you almost imagine you hear it too. The snow underfoot is deep, untouched, and glimmering in the faint light. You feel the weight of isolation settle on you, not in a frightening way but in a strangely peaceful one. Everything is quiet. Even your footsteps sound cautious, almost apologetic. You breathe in the air, crisp enough to sting the inside of your nose, and you feel the place testing you. The mountain men understood this sensation well. Historians still argue whether early trappers preferred to travel alone for strategic reasons or simply because solitude felt safer than unreliable companionship. Whatever the reason, the loneliness carved its own kind of resilience into them. Ahead, a ridge rises like a dark wave against the sky. You tilt your head upward to study it, noticing how the early light spreads across the eastern side, while the western slopes remain in deep shadow. That contrast matters. A builder in winter notices such things instinctively. You feel the wind brushing your cheek, the direction it comes from, and the way it curls around the high rocks. If you were truly out here to survive, you would need to understand this terrain the way an animal does. Where does the wind funnel? Where does snow gather in dangerous drifts? Where might the sun offer precious warmth during the short daylight hours? You keep walking, feeling the cold nip at your ears through your hat. Close by, a stream has frozen into a pale, glassy vein that runs between trees. You crouch at the edge, touching the ice gently with your glove. Beneath the surface, you sense slow movement, water shifting under winter's grip. A breeze moves along the valley, and for a moment it carries a scent of pine and wood resin, sharp and oddly comforting. Even in this harsh environment, there is life. You straighten and look across the landscape. You understand now why mountain men approached each new day like a small test. Before they built a cabin or even planned the foundation, they studied the dawn the way you are studying it now. They watched the angles of sunlight, traced fresh animal tracks, and judged which hollows sheltered warmth and which swallowed it whole. It was not romantic heroism. It was simple survival. Your breath pools in front of you again, and you tuck your chin into your scarf. The horizon grows brighter, soft gold creeping across the sky, and you notice how it transforms the land beneath your feet. Frost turns to glitter, the first rays brushing trees until they look dusted with diamonds. Beautiful, yes, but your body knows beauty does not keep you warm. You flex your toes inside your boots and continue forward, listening to the snow compress. Somewhere behind you, a distant call echoes through the valley, maybe a lone bird or something larger moving through deep forest. These sounds used to bring both comfort and caution to the mountain men. A call could mean pray for food, or it could mean trouble. The wilderness does not provide a syllabus for you to study. It simply hands you challenges, and you respond by learning quickly or not at all. You pause again, letting your eyes travel over a small clearing ahead. Thin mist rises from a cluster of rocks near a depression in the ground. Warm springs occasionally appeared even in brutal winters, small pockets of heat leaking from the earth. Early trappers loved these spaces, not only for thawing frostbitten fingers, but also for the faint warmth that hinted at better building sites nearby. You feel the temptation to wander closer, to hold your hands above the mild steam, but you know your journey continues forward. The cold tugs at your sleeves, as if reminding you that movement is survival. You step back into your slow, crunching pace, letting the dawn expand above you. Each breath grows easier now that the horizon glows a little brighter. The wilderness still feels immense, but as you walk, you sense yourself adjusting. Your body learns the rhythm, your heart steadies, your eyes sharpen. This is exactly what the mountain men experienced on mornings like this. The first daylight always brought a strange encouragement, as if reminding them that they had managed to live one more night. They rose with stiff joints, shook frost from their bedding, and stepped out into the glowing world to make choices that would keep them alive through the next storm. A breeze brushes your cheek again, and you turn with it, noticing a gentle slope that catches more sunlight than the rest. If you were choosing a place to build, this detail could mean everything. But that realization belongs to the next part of your journey. For now, you continue moving through the frostbitten dawn, each step carrying you deeper into the knowledge that survival begins with seeing the world clearly. You drift toward that gentle slope you noticed earlier, letting the rising light guide your steps across the cold terrain. The snow here thins a little, broken by patches of stiff grass that poke through the ice like bristles on an old brush. Your boots sink with a softer sound, more of a cushioned sigh than a crunch, and you feel the land shifting beneath your feet. This is the moment where mountain men slowed down, tightened their focus, and judged the ground with a kind of instinct that came from months and years of necessity. Now you do the same, watching how the wind moves through this place and how the shadows stretch along the valley. You stop, letting the air wrap around your face. You can feel its direction clearly now. A steady push from the northwest, cold, insistent, almost personal. When you turn to face it, tiny crystals sting your cheeks. When you turn away, the difference is instant, like stepping under a blanket. This simple observation means everything. The earliest trappers often built on the leeward side of slopes to reduce wind exposure, a mainstream historical fact that you might recall from wilderness guides or old journals. They learned quickly that even the warmest cabin design loses its battle if the wind has a direct shot at the door. You walk further, following the wind shadow. Your hands trail along low shrubs, fingers brushing branches that feel brittle enough to snap at a glance. The smell of resin rises faintly from one, and you pause to take it in. Pine, frost, and the faint mineral scent of frozen soil mix together in a surprisingly soothing combination. The cold no longer bites quite as sharply, partly because the sun has risen a little, and partly because your mind is busy absorbing every clue the landscape offers. Ahead, you notice a depression in the ground, almost a bowl-shaped dip where snow collects more thickly. At first it looks like a good hiding spot from the wind, but a few steps closer and you realize it is a trap. Too much snow gathers here. One quirky, lesser-known tidbit you once heard claims that some early woodsmen used to toss a stick into snow pockets like this to judge depth. If the stick disappeared with no sound, they knew the snow had drifted dangerously deep. You imagine trying that now, watching your makeshift probe vanish into a silent, soft abyss. You step back from the hollow, instinctively careful. You climb a few paces up the slope, feeling the ground firm beneath your boots. Here, the snow thins again, and the earth feels packed and trustworthy. You look up at the sky, that pale morning blue, and track the sun as it slides over the ridge. In winter months, the sun stays low and weak. Mountain men paid close attention to this, choosing building sites that received as much daylight as possible. A few hours of direct sun could warm a cabin wall enough to make a difference at night. Still, historians still argue whether trappers consistently prioritized sun exposure or if wind protection mattered more. Some old writings suggest they chose sheltered hollows even if sunlight was scarce, while others recall tales of cabins perched high to catch the rare winter rays. As you stand here, you feel the tug of that debate within your own reasoning. Sun or shelter, warmth or wind shadow, nothing is ever entirely simple out here. Your breath flows gently in front of you as you shift your stance and scan the area again. You listen to the soft hiss of wind slipping over the ridge, a long and dreamy sound, almost like someone whispering to you. It nudges the tops of the pine trees, making them quiver just a little. You study their movement. Trees always tell a story. Stunted growth can mean harsh winds. Thick bark can hint at cold seasons that lasted longer than they should. The trunks before you look straight and strong, a promising sign that this section of land does not get battered by storms too often. A slight incline leads down into a small forest clearing framed by pine and spruce. You approach slowly, letting your boots sink into softer snow again, and you kneel to press your gloved hand into it. The cold seeps through the material, but you feel something else too. The snow sits evenly, without strange dips or hidden pockets. That means the ground beneath is smooth, not broken up by roots or rocks. A good building surface. You rise and breathe deeply. A faint sound echoes to your right, the trickle of water beneath ice. You follow it until you see the thin ribbon of a winter stream, narrow enough to step across but reliable enough to promise water year-round. Mountain men valued nearby water, though not too close. Build right next to a river and you risk spring floods or winter ice that creeps into your walls. Build too far and simple daily tasks become exhausting in bitter temperatures. You glance from the stream to the clearing and back again. The distance feels right, not too near, not too far. You tilt your head again, letting the air settle around you. You listen for anything unusual, maybe a warning in the wind or the subtle shift of branches. Nothing seems threatening. Instead, the place feels still, crisp, patient. You walk the perimeter of the clearing, tracing the boundary with slow, thoughtful steps. Each footfall compresses the snow with a gentle hush, and you imagine the same sound beneath the feet of men who stood here long before you ever dreamed of a frontier. A sudden sparkle catches your eye. Small animal tracks curve through the clearing, delicate and tidy, probably from a rabbit. The path winds toward the stream and then back into the trees. The sight brings a small smile. Animals choose the safest paths. If wildlife is comfortable passing through, that suggests the area is stable. Early trappers often watched animal behavior without fully admitting it to each other. Wisdom does not always need a proud announcement. You pause at the center of the clearing and let yourself feel the air properly. You close your eyes for a moment, listening to the deep quiet that surrounds you. No shifting rocks, no sudden drops, no hidden marsh beneath the snow. The ground feels safe, steady, and aware. You open your eyes again and imagine where the cabin might stand. You turn your body slowly, choosing angles and lines long before any wood touches the earth. You feel something settle in your chest, a growing sense of certainty. This is what the mountain men sought each time they searched for a shelter site. Not perfection, but balance. Wind that can be managed. Sunlight that can be welcomed. Water that is close yet respectful. Ground that promises to hold strong through deep winter. The slope behind you acts like a protective wall. The clearing spreads out like a natural front yard. The stream adds both beauty and practicality. Every detail feels like an answer to a question you have barely spoken. You take one last slow walk across the clearing, touching the trunks of nearby trees as you go. Their texture is rough, ridged with sap, frozen in tiny amber beads. You press your palm against one tree, feeling its cold life under the bark. This land may look asleep, but it is awake beneath the surface. It watches you as much as you watch it. You turn back toward the center and exhale softly. Your breath twists through the air in pale spirals. The cold may win some battles, but choosing the right place gives you a fighting chance. You understand now how essential this moment was for the men who came before you. Without choosing wisely, no amount of skill or strength could save them later. You take one step back, then another, letting your boots retrace your path. The clearing waits patiently as you walk away, but the knowledge settles inside you. You have chosen your spot. It is time to explore what comes next. You make your way back toward the clearing with a slower, more thoughtful pace, the cold air slipping along your sleeves while the snow settles quietly around your boots. Now that you have chosen the location, your attention shifts to the resources around you. The mountain men understood that selecting a site was only step one. Step two was learning to read the land with the accuracy of a master craftsman who had no ruler, no blueprint, and no luxury of trial and error. You stand still for a moment and let your gaze fall upon the trees, stones, and earth, knowing that each one plays a part in the cabin that will eventually hold your warmth. You approach the nearest pine and lay your hand along its trunk. The bark feels rigid and slightly crumbly at the edges, cold enough to make your gloves stiffen. As you tap the wood gently with your knuckles, the sound rings solid. Mountain men learn to listen for that ring. A hollow-sounding tree meant trouble. It meant pests burrowed inside or rot creeping up from old wounds. It meant that the wood could split unevenly or crumble during construction. A sturdy, full-bodied ring was a quiet promise that the trunk could serve as a beam, a wall, or even a roof support if cut to the proper length. You take a few steps to another tree, this one taller and darker, its branches bending slightly under the weight of snow. You study the way the needles cluster, their color a healthy green rather than a faded yellow. You brush some snow aside and check the lower trunk for scars. Early trappers often debated whether thick bark or thin bark made better building timber. Historians still argue whether spruce or pine served as the superior cabin log. Some journals praise pine for its straight, predictable grain. Others claim spruce withstood rot better in damp winters. As you examine the trees around you, the debate echoes in your thoughts, but you trust your instincts the way a mountain man would have. You want logs that feel alive, straight, and confident. You walk farther into the wooded edge of the clearing. Here, the ground slopes just slightly and displays an array of stones scattered like small islands in a frozen sea. You crouch beside one, touching its rough surface. The rock is cold, but solid in a way that sparks a sense of stability. A mainstream historical fact worth recalling is that frontier builders often used stone for hearths and chimneys, because it could handle intense heat far better than wood. A well-built stone hearth could mean the difference between a cozy cabin and a tragic fire. You lift a smaller stone with gloved hands, feeling its weight. It is dense, a bit darker than the others, likely full of iron. You imagine how it would stack with others, how it would anchor the warmest corner of your future shelter. You set it back down gently and continue walking. The snow crunches softly under you, as if approving. A thin gust of wind slips through the trees, carrying the scent of sap and cold minerals. You pause to breathe it in. You notice your breath clouds slowly drifting forward like a small personal fog. In this quiet spot, your ears tune to every faint noise. A distant tapping echoes from deeper in the woods. Perhaps a woodpecker searching for breakfast, or maybe ice cracking inside a fallen log. A quirky tidbit you once heard from a wilderness guide comes to mind. Some mountain men claimed they could predict storms based on how loudly woodpeckers hammered in the morning. It sounds amusing, Yet in a place where weather can turn savage in minutes, any clue would have been welcomed. You return your attention to a large fallen trunk, half buried in snow. You brush the frost aside and run your fingers across the exposed wood. This gives you a perfect opportunity to examine the inner rings. The pattern is tight, uniform, and smooth. Logs like this, once dried and shaped, could form sturdy walls. You try pressing your glove into the wood. It resists firmly, neither too soft nor brittle. You nod to yourself, understanding why mountain men surveyed every tree in their surroundings with such obsessive care. Choosing the wrong timber meant wasted labor. And out here, wasted labor could cost you precious warmth or even your life. As you continue down the gentle slope, you pay attention to how the ground feels beneath your boots. Rocky soil can be useful for foundations, but too many loose stones create unstable footing. Soft earth is easy to work with but can shift dangerously during spring thaw. You find an area where soil, though frozen now, rests firmly beneath a thin layer of snow. You kick lightly at the surface until a patch of brown emerges. You rub the soil between your fingers. It is dense, packed with small fragments of decomposed leaves. A reliable sign that this area sits on solid ground rather than a concealed bog. You rise and look around again. Large boulders line one side of the clearing. They look as if they have been resting there for centuries, unmoving and unbothered by the seasons. Their presence offers more than structural possibilities. They serve as natural windbreaks, subtle guardians that help shape the microclimate around your building site. Mountain men often sought out features like this, using the land itself as a silent assistant in their construction efforts. You approach one of the boulders and place your palm flat against its surface. The stone feels coarse, steady, almost reassuring. You imagine how this large rock could reflect heat from your future fires or help insulate one side of the cabin. Not many people today think of rocks as allies. But out here, everything has a purpose if you look closely enough. A bird flutters overhead, landing on a branch with a soft thump. You glance upward and watch its feathers fluff against the cold. Its tiny claws grip the branch with surprising confidence. Birds like this often stay near food sources even in winter. Another sign that this area supports life in subtle ways. You keep exploring, more methodical now. Every few steps, you pause to touch a tree, evaluate its height, or tap its trunk. You gather mental notes. That pine is too twisted. That spruce leans too much. That fir looks perfect, but stands too close to a slope where snow could slide dangerously. Each observation adds to your growing sense of the land. You walk back toward the fallen trunk, lifting a small chunk of bark that has separated from the wood. The underside reveals a smooth, pale inner layer. You rub the surface gently and let the texture sink in. Frontier builders often peeled bark for roof lining, or used it as natural insulation. Some old journals mention how they boiled strips of bark to turn them flexible, using them for binding or even patching damaged walls. The practicality of such materials fascinates you. You imagine yourself doing the same, boiling bark over a fire while snow falls softly around you. A light crack pops behind you. You turn quickly, but it is only a branch shedding its load of snow. Still, the sound reverberates through the forest like a small reminder that nature always acts without explanation. You take a steady breath. The air feels crisp and energizing. You continue deeper into the cluster of trees, this time looking not only at the individual trunks but the spacing between them. Good spacing means easier tree felling. Tight clusters can cause logs to shift unpredictably after cutting. You scan the alignment of the trunks, nodding at the clear paths available for dropping several straight pines. It is almost as if the land has arranged itself to help you. You smile slightly at the thought, amused at how generous the wilderness can appear when you approach it with respect. You circle back toward the stones again. This time you pay more attention to their color. Some stones gleam with a faint bluish tint, hinting at rich mineral content. Others show streaks of gold or red, remnants of the mountain's deep geology. Mountain men sometimes used specific stone types because they heated more evenly or resisted cracking. You imagine building a hearth from stones like these, feeling them radiate heat long after the fire settles into glowing embers. As you wander, your mind drifts to the rhythm of work that will come soon. The swinging of axes, the thud of falling timber, the scrape of bark being peeled. But for now, this quiet survey feels just as important. You are learning the personality of the land. You are forming a partnership with the very materials that will keep you alive when the deepest cold comes. You step onto a slightly raised mound of earth and look across the clearing one more time. The trees stand tall and patient, the stones rest quietly, and the gentle slope shelters the ground from harsh northern winds. Everything fits. Everything speaks the same language. You lift your hand and brush snow from your sleeve. A faint smile forms as you think of how the mountain men must have felt at this exact moment. Relief mixed with determination. Gratitude mixed with urgency. You share that feeling now. With a slow breath, you begin walking back toward the center of the clearing. Behind you, the trees and stones remain exactly where they are, waiting for the work that comes next. And as you step forward, your boots sinking deep into the soft hush of snow, you carry with you the knowledge of the land, ready to shape it into something warm, something sturdy, something that just might outlast the winter. You stand in the clearing with a growing sense of purpose. But before any walls rise or logs fall, something more urgent demands your attention. The cold gnaws at your fingertips, whispering its blunt truth. No shelter can begin without fire. Mountain men learned this during their first brutal nights in unfamiliar ranges, and now you feel that same instinct stirring inside you. You tighten your gloves, breathe out a slow plume of mist, and begin to search the ground for what will become the very first ember of your new life in the wilderness. You crouch beneath a cluster of spruce trees where the branches hang low, their tips heavy with frozen needles. Beneath the overhang, the snow thins enough to reveal a soft bed of dry needles. You rake a handful together, feeling their brittle texture break under your grip. These will burn, but they need help. You reach farther into the shadows and find strips of papery bark curled like small scrolls. According to detailed frontier journals, trappers often relied on the inner bark of birch or resin-rich slivers of pine to start their earliest campfires. You rub the bark gently between your palms and smell the sharp, fragrant sap. Even through the cold, its scent feels like a promise of warmth. You gather more materials, twigs no thicker than a pencil, longer sticks that crack with a satisfying snap, and a few pieces of deadfall that have dried beneath the tree canopy. Each piece carries a story. Some are scarred by old storms, others shaped by hungry insects. You tuck them under your arm as you move, listening to the faint creak of your coat and the soft crunch of your boots. Once your bundle feels sufficient, you return to the center of the clearing and kneel. The sky above has brightened into a pale silver blue, and light filters downward through drifting crystals of frost. You clear a small circle in the snow until the dark earth shows through. The ground feels cold enough to numb your fingertips through your gloves. You arrange your materials in a loose nest, laying tiny twigs in a cone and tucking bark beneath them. You work slowly, allowing your breathing to settle into a calm rhythm. Building a fire is not a hurried act out here. It is a conversation between you and the elements. When you reach for your fire striker, your fingers tremble slightly from the cold. You brace the metal edge and pull it sharply against the stone. Sparks leap out in tiny bursts of gold, vanishing before they touch the bark. You shift your position, angle the striker lower, and try again. This time a spark lands and flickers, catching the resin. You lean close and blow gently. The ember glows brighter, pulsing with fragile life. A thin wisp of smoke curls upward, twisting like a sleepy spirit. You continue to coax it with soft breaths, until flame flutters into being. A warm thrill runs through your chest, subtle but powerful. The flame grows slowly, licking the bark and then the smallest twigs. You feed it carefully, knowing too much fuel too quickly can smother it. You place sticks with deliberate precision, adjusting angles without rushing. As your little fire strengthens, Its warmth reaches your hands, like the first friendly greeting you have received all morning. Historical writings that have survived describe moments exactly like this, where early woodsmen treated fire-making as both a skill and a ritual. For them, fire meant survival. It meant a chance to dry frozen clothes, to melt snow into drinkable water, to cook meat that would otherwise freeze solid. And as you watch your own flame grow taller, you understand those accounts with new clarity. A curious anecdote often mentioned in frontier storytelling circles comes to mind. Some trappers swore that pine resin could burn even on wet days if they chewed it first to soften it, then pressed it into a sticky ball to catch sparks. Whether or not this technique truly worked is uncertain, but the image of a hardened trapper chewing sap like gum makes you smile. You sit back on your heels and lift your palms toward the rising warmth. The sensation is immediate, spreading across your skin and seeping through your gloves. Your breath trails upward into the warming air, creating swirling patterns above the flame. The cold no longer feels like an enemy. It feels like a stern teacher, one who expects you to pay attention. And you do. Some researchers today still discuss the earliest fire-starting tools used in remote mountain regions. They debate whether flint and steel remained dominant throughout the fur-trapping era, or whether newer methods spread faster than records suggest. Whatever the truth may be, you realize the specific tool matters far less than the determination behind it. Fire only answers those who refuse to give up. You add larger sticks now, arranging them slowly as the flames rise with a brighter, more confident glow. Heat washes over your legs, and you feel muscles in your shoulders relax for the first time since dawn. You shift your weight, settling onto a fallen log half covered in snow. The warmth begins to thaw the stiffness in your fingertips. The clearing around you changes subtly as the fire strengthens. The trees seem less intimidating, their branches no longer looming but simply standing watch. The stones glint faintly in the growing light. Shadows dance across the snow as the flames cast long, flickering lines. The entire landscape seems to respond to the presence of fire, as if acknowledging you as something more than a temporary wanderer. You glance toward the edge of the clearing, noticing how the smoke trails upward before drifting sideways with the wind. Smoke is a storyteller too. Its direction reveals where wind funnels between trees. Its speed hints at coming weather. You try to read it the way mountain men once did. The smoke lifts smoothly before curling eastward. That means the air is fairly still, a good omen for beginning construction soon. You move closer again, stretching out your hands and soaking in every bit of warmth. A subtle crackle rises from the burning wood. Each pop marks another moment of progress. You break a chunk of snow from the ground, hold it near the fire, and watch it melt into droplets that slip between your fingers. A calm satisfaction washes through you. With this flame you could warm food, heat stones for bedding, boil water, or light lanterns. It is a foundation for everything that comes next. In the midst of this soft glow, your attention drifts to the practical needs of a true fireside in a mountain home. The hearth that will later anchor your cabin must be sturdy enough to hold heat, yet designed to release smoke cleanly. If it fails, smoke will creep back inside, choking the air and staining the walls. You picture the stones you examined earlier and imagine stacking them carefully, building a hearth that can endure the long winter ahead. You rise from the fallen log and walk slowly around your fire, watching the flames from every angle. Your shadow jumps across the snow, stretching and shrinking in a rhythm that feels alive. You pause behind the fire, letting its warmth hit your back. It feels different from this direction, softer and more distant. You close your eyes and listen to the fire breathe. You recall a little detail mentioned in a rare winter guidebook from the 19th century. The author wrote that the best fire is one that sings, not screams. A singing fire crackles softly, burns steadily, and gives warmth without throwing sparks wildly. A screaming fire, according to the old writer, pops and hisses with chaotic energy because the wood is too wet or stacked poorly. You smile at the comparison, listening carefully to your flame. It sings. Satisfied, you kneel once more and feed it a few more sticks. The fire grows, painting the air above it with ripples of heat. Your cheeks warm, your shoulders loosen, your mind quiets. Fire was the first shelter. Before walls, before roofs, before chinking or chimneys, the mountain men had flames to soften the edge of the wilderness. You feel that now. As heat settles into your bones, the next steps will be harder. Cutting trees, shaping logs, lifting heavy beams. But this moment, kneeling before a fresh fire, gives you the courage to move forward. You take a slow breath and let it drift into the morning air. The flame stands steady, bright, confident. You rise, brushing snow from your knees, and let the warmth stay with you as you prepare to begin the real work of turning this clearing into a home. You rise from the warmth of the small fire and feel the cold close in again, not quite unfriendly but certainly insistent. It reminds you that heat fades fast out here, and the true defense against winter is not only fire but the tools that let you shape a home. Mountain men understood that a cabin was nothing without good implements. An axe that split cleanly, a saw that did not wander, a blade that held its edge in the cold. You step away from the fire with renewed determination, knowing that the next stage of this journey invites you into the world of simple tools and the immense skill needed to wield them. You kneel beside a fallen log and pull your pack close. Inside it rests an axe, its wooden handle polished smooth from years of gripping hands. You lift it carefully and let the weight settle into your palm. The balance feels steady, familiar even if you have only carried it for a short time. Many historical accounts mention how trappers often spent weeks crafting or modifying their own handles, shaping them to suit their shoulders, grip, and strength. A poorly balanced axe was no small inconvenience. It was a danger to fingers, shins, and every essential muscle needed to survive. You test the blade by running a gloved thumb carefully along the edge. Even through the leather you sense its sharpness. An edge like this can bite into frozen wood with surprising ease. You swing it lightly once, twice, letting the tool whistle through the cold morning air. The movement wakes up your arms and shoulders, stirring the blood through muscles that stiffened overnight. To your left, a small spruce stands with branches drooping low under the weight of snow. You brush your fingertips along one of its limbs. The wood feels sturdy, a little springy, and alive. Not ideal for major building beams, but perfect for tool handles, pegs, and smaller construction needs. You pick a fallen branch nearby and test its strength by bending it. It resists for a moment before cracking sharply with a brittle snap. You let the two pieces fall into the snow. Every sound out here echoes with a clarity that feels almost ceremonial. Mountain toolkits were simple, but each item served multiple purposes. The axe for felling, the adze for smoothing, the draw knife for peeling bark, the auger for boring holes. You look around the clearing and mentally picture these tasks unfolding one by one. A well-made cabin takes more than brute force. It takes a deep familiarity with the tools in your hands. You rest the axe against your shoulder and walk toward a pine with a straight trunk and clean height. You note how sunlight strikes its bark, revealing ridges like stacked rings of caramel and smoke. You reach out and tap it with your knuckles. A solid tone answers. You nod to yourself. This is the kind of tree the mountain men prized. Tall enough to provide long logs, straight enough to split without twisting, thick enough to hold heat inside a cabin wall. According to surviving frontier diaries, many trappers chose trees that had grown close enough to their neighbors to stretch tall without wasting energy on low branches. Those trees became natural building beams, shaped patiently by competition and time. Before making the first cut, you test the snow beneath your feet. Your boots sink slightly but land on firm ground. The tree stands on stable earth, which means it should fall predictably. Wind matters too. You tilt your head, feeling the breeze brush your cheek. It flows lightly from the west, enough to guide the fall but not enough to surprise you. You step back, rotate your shoulders, and tighten your grip on the axe handle. You draw a deep breath and let the cold fill your lungs. Then you swing. The blade kisses the bark with a solid thud, sending a tremor through your arms. Wood chips spray outward in a pale arc, flying into the snow like thin shavings of butter. You swing again and again, finding the rhythm that the mountain men knew so well. The sound echoes across the clearing with a steady beat, like a simple drum marking the hours of the day. As you work, heat rises beneath your layers. Your breath grows heavier, drifting into the cold in thicker clouds. Each chop removes a neat wedge from the trunk. The notch deepens slowly, but surely. You pause occasionally to clear chips from the ground, letting the scent of fresh sap drift upward. The aroma is sweet, sharp, and deeply tied to winter forests. A peculiar bit of oral lore says some trappers believed the smell of sap in cold weather was lucky, a sign that the wood was pure and the land approved of their presence. Whether true or not, you inhale the fragrance with appreciation. You continue chopping until the front notch reaches the proper angle. Then you step around to the opposite side and begin shaping the finishing cut. Snow falls from the branches above, with little whispered patters. The tree groans faintly with each strike, a long, tired exhale of a giant nearing its rest. As you work, your mind drifts to another conversation that often emerges among historians. Some researchers still disagree about the exact designs of the earliest mountain tools. Certain records describe long-handled axes with narrow blades, while others mention broader tool heads preferred for splitting heavy logs. Even now, the academic world tries to piece together what daily life truly looked like for those who lived far beyond the reach of consistent documentation. While researchers debate the fine points, the core truth remains clear. These tools made survival possible in a landscape that showed little mercy. You raise the axe again and deliver another powerful swing. A low, deep crack resonates through the clearing. The trunk shivers. You step back, positioning yourself safely to the side. The tree leans, hesitates, then begins its slow descent. Snow shakes loose in a flurry as branches sway. Finally, it falls with a long, rolling crash that echoes into the forest. Silence follows. You exhale a long breath you did not realize you were holding. The fallen tree lies across the snow like a great sleeping creature. You approach it with quiet respect, running your gloved hand along the bark. The chill of the trunk seeps into your palm. This tree will soon become walls and beams. It will hold heat, resist storms, and stand as your defense against the deepest winter nights. You close your hand into a gentle fist, acknowledging the trade of life for shelter. But one tree is never enough. A cabin requires many logs, cut with precision and shaped with care. You walk to the base of the fallen trunk and kneel. With your saw, you measure out the first section. The teeth bite into the wood in a steady rhythm, scraping and humming as you move your arm back and forth. Sawdust dusts your gloves and floats like golden powder in the pale morning light. You work slowly, letting the motion warm your shoulders and back. The cold no longer feels harsh. Instead, it feels like a background companion, the kind that watches silently as you learn this place. The saw moves through the wood with steady progress. When the cut finishes, the first log rolls free with a gentle thump. You straighten your back, stretching your arms overhead. Your breath swirls above you, soft and wandering. You take a moment to look around the clearing again. The fire still burns quietly. The snow reflects morning light with a soft shimmer. A bird calls from somewhere high in the pines. The world feels balanced for a moment, caught between effort and reward. You shift to the next cut, then another. Each piece you remove brings you closer to a warm home. As you work, small patches of sweat form along your back despite the cold. You pause every so often to remove your gloves and let your hands hover above the fire, absorbing its warmth before returning to the labor. Cutting, shaping, carrying. This is the rhythm of building. It fills your muscles with fatigue but also with purpose. These tasks connect you directly to the experiences of the early mountain men. No machines softened their work. No shortcuts eased their burden. Every beam they lifted was a testament to their will and endurance. By the time you finish preparing several long logs, your body hums with warmth. You stand up, breathing deeply, watching steam rise gently from your coat. The clearing feels like a workshop now, a place shaped not by harsh winter but by your growing strength. The tools rest beside you, their metal glinting faintly in the snow. Your axe handle shows fresh scuffs where your gloves rubbed it. Your saw teeth glimmer with fine sawdust. You nod approvingly. These simple implements are the heartbeat of your construction. Without them, the forest remains an untamed world. With them, you can carve out a space of safety and warmth. You gather your tools and return to the fire. Its crackle greets you softly, almost like a welcome after the exertion. You hold your hands toward the flame again, letting the heat sink deep into your bones. You close your eyes for a moment, listening to the low hum of wind and the fading echo of the tree you felled. The next stages will demand even more effort, but you feel ready. The tools have been awakened. The land has offered its materials. And you, standing in the quiet glow of the clearing, feel the first true spark of shelter forming in your mind. You step away from the fire once more, breathing in the cold air as your boots press into the snow with soft, rhythmic crunches. The logs you cut lie scattered like sleeping giants, their bark darkened with frost and sap. Now comes a moment. Mountain men understood on a deep, almost instinctive level. The first logs must be laid with care. A cabin does not begin with walls or a roof. It begins with a foundation of timber placed so precisely that every later step depends on it. You move toward the clearing center, ready to test both your strength and your patience. The ground is firm beneath a thin crust of snow. You kneel and brush the surface clear with your gloves, revealing frozen soil mixed with small roots and winter-hardened grass. You scrape a wider path until a rectangle emerges faintly in your mind. This will be the footprint of your cabin. Not too wide, not too long. Mountain homes were often compact because smaller spaces held warmth more easily, and the logs needed for larger structures required dangerously heavy lifting. Many historic journals from remote trappers mention cabins no larger than a modest room, just enough to sleep, cook, mend gear, and store supplies. You walk along the invisible border, gauging each step. You feel the slope beneath your boots, the wind direction, and the sunlight filtering through the trees. The quiet helps you think. You pick up 2 long logs, each thick as your thigh, their ends still rough from the saw. You press one end into the snow and lift the other until the log rests fully on your shoulder. The weight sinks through your frame, anchoring your muscles into the earth. Step by slow step, you carry the first log across the clearing. It scratches the ground behind you, leaving a crooked line in the snow. You lower it into place gently and adjust its angle. You do not want it tilting toward the downhill side. You check the level by sight alone, something the mountain men did without hesitation. Their eyes became their measuring tools, trained by long winter seasons and the need to avoid drafts in their walls. Before positioning the next log, you kneel beside the first and tap it with your knuckles. The sound feels steady. According to several well-preserved frontier records, many early cabins began with logs only slightly flattened on one side to prevent rolling. You pull your adze from your pack, lift it above your shoulder, and bring it down in clean, controlled arcs. Chips of bark scatter. Wood curls up from each strike, pale and fragrant. You repeat the motion, smoothing the underside of the log into a stable base. A little distance away, a woodpecker taps rhythmically on a tree, the sound echoing with a crisp pace. You pause to listen, struck by how quietly the woods accept your work. A curious story often shared in mountain settlements claimed that if a woodpecker tapped while you laid your foundation, it meant the land approved your cabin site. You smile faintly at the superstition. Still, the soft tapping feels strangely encouraging. You lift the second log now, this one slightly thinner but straighter than the first. Your hands ache slightly from earlier labor, but you ignore the sting. You rest the log beside the first and adjust its placement until they form a clean, parallel pair. The space between them marks the width of the cabin floor. Snow lies untouched within the boundary. Soon it will hold a hearth, a bedroll, tools, and whatever warmth you can create. You continue shaping the underside of the second log with the adze. The blade bites into the wood with a satisfying rhythm. Chips scatter across your boots. As you work, your mind drifts to a long-running question often discussed among researchers today. Some specialists still explore whether the earliest frontier builders preferred dovetail joints from the very beginning, or if simpler saddle notches dominated until later years. Different regions favored different styles, and surviving structures vary widely. You realize that out here, the best method is the one that holds steady against wind and time. You reach for your knife and begin marking where the notches will go. The wood fibers shine faintly under the cold light. You carve slowly, feeling the blade slide through layers that resist with gentle firmness. Each mark becomes a guide for how the logs will interlock. Your breath rises in soft clouds above your work. The silence around you deepens, broken only by the occasional flutter of wings or the groaning whisper of a distant tree shifting under snow. When the notches are carved, you retrieve a shorter log and test it across the corners. It sits slightly crooked. You lift it again, shave a bit of wood from the notch, and try once more. This time it settles with a clean fit, hugging the lower logs like a puzzle piece, meant only for this spot. You linger for a moment, letting the satisfaction settle in your chest. A good corner joint feels like a handshake with the land, firm and confident. Now the cabin begins to look like something real. 4 logs placed in a rectangle signal the first steps of a structure. You walk around it slowly, observing the lines, the angles, the way the shadows fall inside the snowy outline. The air feels colder inside the boundary, as if the future walls have already begun gathering the winter around them. You lower yourself onto one of the foundation logs and rest for a moment. Your muscles burn pleasantly, warm from exertion even in the chilly morning. The fire crackles softly in the distance, its warmth too faint to reach you but comforting in its presence. You run your palm along the log beneath you. The bark is rough but sturdy, lined with ridges that feel like natural grip points. You picture how the cabin walls will rise, layer by layer, and eventually cradle a space that belongs entirely to you. You add the next pair of logs, working through the same cycle of lifting, adjusting, carving, testing, and fitting. Each piece falls into place with increasing confidence. Your hands move more naturally, and your body adapts to the weight. You develop a rhythm, something almost meditative that blurs the cold air into a simple backdrop. Before long, your foundation grows into a waist-high outline of timber. The logs stack neatly, their interlocking joints holding firm. Snow gathers gently in the corners where the wood meets the ground. You scoop it away, knowing that moisture is no friend to new construction. The shape of your cabin emerges slowly, and with it come small details that you begin to notice. Light filters through the gaps in the logs, thin golden stripes dancing on the snow. The air inside the foundation feels still, shielded from the wind by the rising walls. When you stand in the center, the clearing looks different through the emerging frame, more intimate and more familiar. A shiver rolls up your back as the breeze shifts. You step outside the frame and pull your coat tighter. The sun hangs low but bright, throwing long shadows from the logs. You take a moment to rub your hands together, warming them through friction. Then you return to the work. You lift another beam, a long and heavy one, letting it settle against your shoulder with a familiar strain. You carry it to the rising cabin wall and begin carving the notches. Sweat trickles between your shoulder blades despite the cold. You move with care, carving smooth channels for the beam to rest securely. When the beam falls into place, it sits perfectly, its weight pressing into the structure with a sense of belonging. You knock it gently with the back of your axe to settle it. A hollow thump answers you, firm and confident. You step back and admire the progress. The foundation logs curve slightly along their natural grain, giving the structure a rugged elegance. The corners fit together like ancient teeth locking in. The cabin rises with quiet determination, much like the mountain men who built such shelters long before you walked this clearing. All around, the wilderness watches with silent interest. A raven circles above once, calling out as if acknowledging your work. A light breeze shifts the branches overhead, scattering fine snow that drifts down like ash from a calm fire. You wipe your brow with your sleeve and breathe deeply. The scent of fresh sap lingers in the air. Your arms ache. Your breath feels heavy, but your spirit feels grounded. The first logs are laid. The cabin has taken its first real shape, and you stand inside its shadow, knowing this is only the beginning. You stand inside the rising skeleton of the cabin, surrounded by logs stacked in their neat interlocking lines. The cold air curls through the gaps, slipping between the wood with quiet insistence. This is the moment when mountain men turn their attention to a task both tedious and essential. A cabin might stand tall and proud, but if the wind can nose its way through small cracks, all the effort becomes little more than decoration. You look around at the seams between the logs, feeling the faint current of icy air brushing your hands. It is time for chinking. You kneel close to the base of the wall and run your fingers along one of the gaps. The space feels narrow, but deep enough for wind to climb straight inside. Mountain men filled these spaces with whatever nature provided. Moss, clay, dried grass, shredded bark, handfuls of animal hair. Anything that could bind together and harden into a shield against the cold. You stand, brushing snow from your knees, and begin gathering materials from the area around your clearing. Under the shade of a tall spruce tree, you find a lush bed of moss sheltered from the worst of the frost. You crouch and lift it gently, its springy texture cold but pliable. You peel off long strips and stack them into a bundle. According to several finely detailed frontier accounts, moss was prized because it expanded slightly as it dried, filling gaps more tightly than other materials. It also insulated surprisingly well, forming a natural cushion that trapped warm air inside the cabin. You hold a handful close to your face and inhale its earthy scent, imagining how it will soon become a hidden layer of warmth behind the wooden walls. Next, you search for fibers to bind the moss. Along the forest floor, you find strips of bark that have peeled naturally from fallen logs. You test their strength by pulling gently. They flex without snapping. Good. You gather more, rolling them into loose coils. As you lift one particularly long piece, you recall a curious bit of winter lore passed down in remote trapping communities. Some woodsmen believed that bark harvested in winter carried a quiet stubbornness that made cabins stronger. It is a superstition, of course, but you cannot deny that the bark feels tough and reliable in your hands. You make your way to a cluster of thin shrubs, where tall, dry grasses rise from the snow like frozen ribbons. You collect several handfuls, snapping off the brittle tops and bundling the stalks together. These grasses will serve as filler, stuffing the smallest cracks before you press the moss in place. You rub a strand between your fingers and listen to the faint whisper it produces. The sound feels comforting, like nature lending its quiet support to your effort. With your arms full, you return to the cabin's frame. You set the bundles down and take a moment to warm your hands near the fire before beginning the meticulous work ahead. When your fingers regain their flexibility, you kneel near the lowest gap in the wall and begin pushing dried grass inside. The stalks bend and twist, forming a soft bed. You press moss on top of it, packing it firmly with your thumb and the blunt edge of your knife handle. The moss squeezes into the space, expanding slightly with each push. This work is slow, repetitive, and tiring, but it is essential. Without thorough chinking, warm air escapes and cold air slips in with sharp determination. You move to the next gap and repeat the process. Grass first, moss second. Bark strips woven in to secure the bind. Each movement feels purposeful. Each press of your palm deepens your connection to the structure. A gentle breeze passes through the clearing and brushes the back of your neck. You glance up at the tree line and notice snow shifting on a distant branch before falling in a quiet cascade. The forest responds to everything, even the slightest change. That awareness reminds you of something you read long ago. Some researchers have spent years studying the construction methods of early mountain cabins, comparing surviving structures to old letters and journals. Many of these scholars present opposing interpretations about how much insulation mountain men truly used. Some insist they layered thick moss between every log. Others argue they relied mostly on mud or clay, treating moss only as a supplement. The debate has never found a clear answer, but as you work, you sense that practicality ruled more than preference. You use what you have, and you use it well. You continue upward along the wall, sliding moss into each crevice. Sap stains your gloves, and green smudges appear along your sleeves. The work leaves your hands tired, but the progress lifts your spirits. As the gaps begin closing one by one, you imagine the cold winds of later months failing to find a way inside. You picture yourself sitting near the hearth on a silent winter night, feeling warmth wrap around your shoulders because of the work you are doing now. When you reach a particularly wide gap, you weave several bark strips together into a thick braid and press it firmly into the space before adding moss. The braid holds surprisingly well. You lean your weight into it, tightening the fit. It feels solid, dependable. You smile to yourself, appreciating how simple materials can become strong when handled with intention. You rise to stretch your back, stepping outside the cabin frame to admire your progress from a distance. The wall looks textured now, speckled with the greens and browns of moss and bark. Sunlight glints off the damp surfaces, painting soft highlights along the logs. You notice how the wall seems to breathe differently. Where cold air once threaded through freely, now the cabin feels quieter inside, more sheltered, more complete. You return to the opposite side and start again. This time your movements grow even more fluid. You tear strips of moss without looking. You twist fibers with one hand while packing with the other. Your breath hangs in the air in soft clouds as you work, and soon your gloves sting with cold. You stop only long enough to warm them by the fire before returning again to the steady task of sealing the walls. The forest hums faintly in the distance. The fire crackles softly behind you, and your work becomes an almost meditative rhythm. Before long, you reach the upper row of logs. The gaps grow narrower here, but you still fill them with care. Even the smallest crack can undo your effort when winter begins its nightly assault. You press one final tuft of moss into place and smooth the edges. A sense of accomplishment settles warmly in your chest. You step back inside the cabin frame for another inspection. The wind enters far more faintly now. It feels like a soft whisper instead of a sharp intrusion. You walk a slow circle within the foundation, feeling how the air holds still in the corners and moves more gently along the walls. The space feels warmer already, as if the cabin itself acknowledges your attention. You press your palm against a chinked section, testing its firmness. The moss does not budge. The bark strips hold like old rope. The walls feel purposeful, almost protective. Outside, a crow calls from the treetops, breaking the silence with a sharp announcement. You look up to see it hopping along a branch, feathers fluffed against the cold. It tilts its head toward your cabin, as if inspecting your efforts. Then it takes flight, flapping slowly across the clearing. You watch it disappear into the woods, then turn back to your work with a small smile. The walls stand tighter now, stronger, prepared. Chinking may not be the most glamorous part of building a frontier shelter, but it transforms a drafty pile of logs into a real home. And now, for the first time since you stepped into this frozen wilderness, your cabin begins to feel like a place where warmth can truly live. You step back into the center of the cabin, letting your gaze drift toward the far wall where the heart of the home will soon rise. A warm shelter begins with strong walls, but a truly livable refuge requires something deeper. Mountain men built their cabins small and sturdy, yet the one feature they poured the most care into was the hearth. Fire warmed their meals, dried their clothes, lit their evenings, and kept the long winter nights from swallowing them whole. Without a reliable hearth, even the tightest cabin would feel cold and lifeless. You turn toward the stack of stones gathered earlier and feel a quiet anticipation growing inside you. The stones rest at the edge of the clearing, half covered in delicate sheets of frost. You walk toward them slowly, brushing your glove over the top layer. The cold bites sharply at your fingertips, but the stones feel solid and reassuring. You study their shapes one by one. Some are flat, like thick pancakes of granite. Others are bulky and irregular, strong enough to anchor the base of a fireplace. According to careful observations preserved in old trade journals, the mountain men favored stones that resisted cracking under heat. They searched for dense, heavy types that did not splinter easily. You lift one stone and test its weight. It strains your wrist slightly. Perfect. You begin sorting the stones by shape and size. Flat ones on one side, large blocks on another, medium-sized pieces stacked neatly in between. This quiet organization feels almost ceremonial, as if preparing tools for a ritual. You kneel beside the largest stone and scrape away the frost. Beneath the cold surface lies a smooth, grey texture. When you tap it lightly with your knuckles, it gives off a deep, steady thud. You nod to yourself. This one will make a solid cornerstone. A faint breeze stirs behind you. When you look up, a single leaf tumbles across the snow, bright amber against the white. It skitters to a stop near your foot. An old frontier tale, often repeated among long winter gatherings, comes to mind. It described how some trappers read falling leaves as signs guiding them to good hearthstones. The story has no scientific reasoning behind it, but it lingers in your memory with surprising charm. You pick up the leaf gently and let it fall again, watching it drift to the side of your future fireplace. You return to your work. Before lifting anything heavy, you clear the ground where the hearth will sit. Kneeling, you scrape away the snow until a wide patch of dark soil lies exposed. The dirt is stiff, frozen in place like an unbroken plate. You chop at it with the edge of your shovel until it loosens into clumps. You do this to create a level foundation and also to make sure no roots or uneven patches will cause your stones to shift. You smooth the soil with your hands, creating a flat bed that feels firm beneath your palm. With the ground ready, you grip the first cornerstone. Its cold surface presses into your glove as you lift it with deliberate strength. Your breath puffs in short bursts, and your muscles tremble slightly under the weight. You carry the stone to the base of the wall and lower it carefully into position. When it settles, you give it a slight push with your boot to ensure it holds its place. The sound it makes against the ground is deep and confident. Next, you choose a second stone, then a third, forming a rough arch along the bottom edge of the future hearth. You adjust each one, sliding them gently until they sit snugly against their neighbors. These stones must support the full weight of future fires, so every placement matters. You pause for a moment and sit back on your heels, examining the outline. It looks uneven. You shift a stone slightly. Better. Some specialists who study early frontier craftsmanship remark that no two mountain hearths were the same. Each was shaped by whatever stones the land offered and whatever style suited the builder's hands. No measurements. No standardized plans. Just instinct and a sharp eye. You understand that now as you continue arranging the stones. Every piece must fit, like it has always belonged here. You lift a medium-sized stone and wedge it into place above the cornerstones. The gap it fills disappears under its weight. You follow with another, this one flatter, pressing it into the growing wall with gentle force. A small puff of frost rises as they settle together. The wall creeps upward slowly, like the first steps of a mountain emerging from snow. You pause to wipe your brow. Even in the cold, the work sends heat rolling through your body. Your breath fogs the air, drifting upward in soft ribbons. A bird rustles nearby, perched on the edge of a bare branch, watching your progress with quiet curiosity. Its head tilts once, twice, as if approving the structure. You reach for a particularly smooth stone with a rounded top. As you lift it, your mind drifts to a question often explored by modern historians. They continue to examine whether frontier hearths doubled as ovens by design, or if the idea of baking inside stone cavities emerged only later in the settlement era. Evidence remains scattered and difficult to interpret. Looking at the stone in your hands, you can see why the debate persists. Its shape practically invites the thought of stacking stones into a small cooking pocket, yet no clear records confirm it. You place the stone carefully into the midsection of the hearth wall. It slots into the structure with a satisfying thud. The wall now reaches your knee, and you can already imagine flames dancing against it. You kneel again to reinforce the base, wedging small stones into the gaps to lock everything tightly together. Cold air swirls around you, lifting strands of your breath into thin curls that fade quickly. Bit by bit, the hearth rises. It grows wide enough to contain a strong fire and tall enough to protect the cabin walls from stray sparks. You continue stacking stones, adjusting angles, pressing each piece into place with steady hands. Your knees grow cold from kneeling in the snow, but the work keeps you warm enough to ignore the sting. By the time the hearth reaches thigh height, your body hums with fatigue. You step back to survey the work, letting your eyes trace the curves and edges. The stones catch the light in small, scattered reflections. Each surface tells a tiny story carved by time. Grooves from ancient rivers, cracks from freezing seasons, smooth patches worn by centuries of wind. You gather a handful of dirt mixed with small pebbles and pack it gently between the stones. The mixture binds the gaps and stabilizes the structure. You repeat this step until the wall feels solid under your touch. At last, you choose a broad, flat stone for the hearth's top ledge. It is heavy, testing the full strength of your arms as you lift it. You carry it slowly, carefully, aware of how essential this piece will be. When you lower it into place, it settles with a deep, reassuring sound. You press your palms against it and feel the coldness spread across your gloves. This is the true center of the cabin, the place where warmth will grow. You stand inside your emerging home, breathing deeply. The new hearth transforms the space. Even without fire, the structure feels anchored, grounded, real. Your mind drifts ahead for a moment, imagining the glow of flames reflecting on the logs, the soothing crackle of burning wood, and the deep comfort of heat spreading across the room. You take one slow step backward, then another, admiring the shape of the hearth from a distance. The forest surrounds the clearing in complete stillness, as if acknowledging your progress. Snow clings to branches like lace. The sky hangs pale above you. You close your eyes briefly and breathe in the scent of fresh stone and cold earth. Your cabin now carries a heart, silent for the moment but ready for fire. And with this first rise of stone, warmth draws closer than ever. You step back from the hearth and look upward, following the line of the unfinished walls, until your gaze meets the cold sky. The wind moves lightly across the clearing, brushing the tops of the logs and sending a faint whistle through the narrow spaces where future beams will rest. The cabin stands sturdy at its base, but without a roof it remains vulnerable, open to the sky and the storms that will inevitably arrive. Mountain men learned quickly that a strong roof often meant the difference between enduring a winter and being buried beneath it. Snow could come down in heavy sheets, piling so deep and so fast that even seasoned trappers sometimes woke to the groaning weight of the forest itself. You take a slow breath and turn toward the pile of trimmed logs waiting near the tree line. These will serve as rafters. Each log must be straight enough to span the cabin's width and light enough for you to lift without losing your grip. The air stings your cheeks as you approach the pile, and the snow crunches crisply beneath your boots. You squat beside the logs and begin examining each one with quiet focus. You lift a long pine beam and run your hand along its length. The surface feels smooth where the bark has been peeled away, exposing pale wood beneath. In detailed archival notes written by traveling foresters of the time, there are mentions of how trappers often selected roof beams from young pines because the wood bent slightly before breaking. That flexibility allowed roofs to handle the weight of heavy snow without snapping suddenly. You tilt the beam, watching how it balances. This one will do. You drag it to the side of the cabin, then return for another. As you lift the second beam, a small memory surfaces. Old mountain families sometimes said the strongest rafters were chosen by sound rather than sight. They would knock each piece of wood with the back of a knife and listen. A clear tone meant healthy fibers. A dull tone suggested hidden rot. You tap this beam lightly. The tone rings sharp. You smile to yourself. That superstition might hold a bit of truth after all. You set 2 beams aside and gather several shorter pieces that will serve as cross supports. Each one must be trimmed, shaved, and notched to fit the upper logs of the cabin. You carry them to the hearth, sit on a flat stone, and begin working with your knife. Wood curls gather in piles around your feet as you carve one clean notch after another. The motion is slow but feels almost calming. Your breath drifts into the cold air in steady clouds, while your hands shape each beam with practiced rhythm. As you carve, you think about the ongoing discussions among researchers who study early wilderness construction. Some believe the steep roof pitch commonly seen in preserved cabins was a deliberate adaptation to heavy mountain snowfalls. Others argue that steep roofs came from European traditions carried over by settlers and trappers without much local modification at first. Both ideas have evidence, yet neither answers the question fully. You glance at the frame of your own cabin and know immediately why the pitches grew tall in the mountains. Snow is heavy. Snow moves. Snow demands respect. When the notches are finished, you brush wood flakes from your coat and rise to your feet. You hoist the first long beam and rest one end against the top of the cabin wall. Climbing cautiously onto the lower logs, you lift the other end until it spans the width of the cabin. The beam settles into its carved groove with a firm, satisfying sound. You test its stability by pressing your weight against it. It holds. You place the second beam beside it, then step back to study their alignment. They angle upward cleanly, forming the first lines of a steep roof. The sight fills you with a small sense of triumph. The roof begins with only 2 beams, yet the change feels transformative. The cabin no longer looks like an open wooden box. It looks like a place that intends to survive winter. You return to the beam pile and select 2 more. Snowflakes flutter lightly around you as you work, drifting from a passing cloud that has wandered over the clearing. They melt on your gloves, tiny cold kisses that vanish as quickly as they fall. By the time you lift the next pair of beams, the sky has brightened again into a pale, cold blue. Layer by layer, you raise the rafters. Each new beam meets the logs with a firm connection, shaped precisely by your knife and secured by the weight of the wood itself. You wedge them into place, checking the angles carefully. As you work, the cabin begins to gather a new shape. The rafters rise like ribs, forming a strong protective arch overhead. When the last rafter settles into place, you climb down and brush frost from your sleeves. The frame of the roof stands open above you, its lines casting faint shadows across the snow. You walk slowly beneath it, letting your eyes follow the pattern of beams. The space between them will soon be covered, but for this moment it feels like a tall wooden lattice against the pale sky. The next stage requires thinner poles, branches, and strips of bark to form a solid surface for the roof covering. You pick up your axe and move toward a grove of slender spruce. Their branches point upward like frozen spears, their trunks narrow and straight. You select one and begin trimming the branches carefully. The wood smells fresh and resinous, filling the air with its sharp scent. You cut more poles, stacking them into a neat bundle. Once the poles are ready, you climb back onto the cabin structure and begin laying them across the rafters. Each pole stretches from one side of the cabin to the other, resting securely atop the angled beams. You tie some in place using fibers twisted from dried bark. Others settle naturally into the grooves of the rafters, held by friction and angle. As you braid the bark fiber, you remember a lesser-known detail whispered among seasoned woodsmen. Some old trappers would soften the fibers in their mouths before tying them, claiming it made the bark swell slightly and tighten as it dried. It is a rustic practice, and you decide to simply twist the fibers with your gloved hands instead. Still, The resourcefulness of those early builders makes you smile. With the poles in place, the roof begins to resemble a skeletal canopy. You walk along the rafters carefully, keeping your balance while laying additional layers of branches and bark sheets. These overlapping pieces help create a surface upon which heavier coverings will rest. The wind brushes your face, but the cabin beneath you feels increasingly sheltered. When you step back down into the clearing, the structure looks transformed. The high-pitched roof frame stands tall, ready for its final covering. You walk around the cabin slowly, appreciating how the angled beams rise like protective wings. Shadows fall across the snow in long, smooth lines. The forest seems quieter now, as if acknowledging the seriousness of this stage. A roof is the great defender. It stops snow from burying your space, keeps rain from soaking your bedding, and holds warmth where you need it most. You take one last look at the ridge beams, admiring their strength. They rise cleanly, their angles sharp and confident. The work ahead will involve covering the roof tightly enough to withstand storms, but for now, these beams stand as the backbone of your future shelter. You breathe deeply, feeling the crisp air fill your lungs. The cabin stands stronger than ever, and above it, the first true lines of your winter shield point toward the sky. You stand beneath the rising skeleton of the roof, feeling the cold air slip gently between the beams and brush against your cheeks. The rafters arch above you like sturdy ribs, but without proper insulation they remain nothing more than bare bones. Mountain men understood that a roof without thoughtful layering could betray them in the first true storm. Snow would slither through weak gaps, cold air would seep down from above, and heat would flee upward as if the night itself dragged it away. You breathe slowly, letting the importance of this new task settle in your chest. It is time to gather the hidden scraps of nature and turn them into warmth. You take your axe and move toward the forest edge where spruce branches hang low in clusters. You walk beneath their dark needles, listening to the soft hiss of snow falling from their tips. You reach up and tug gently at a long branch. It bends, then breaks with a quiet crack. The needles spill their sharp scent into the air, a fragrance that wakes your senses instantly. According to detailed field notes left by early woodsmen, evergreen boughs made excellent first-layer insulation because their needles trapped pockets of air. Those pockets slowed heat loss and prevented cold drafts from weaving downward. You collect armfuls of spruce boughs, stacking them in tidy bundles. Their tips brush your coat, leaving faint trails of sap on the fabric. The scent of resin lingers pleasantly behind you as you return to the cabin. You lift the first bundle and climb carefully onto the rafters. The wood creaks faintly beneath your boots, but the structure holds steady. You kneel and begin laying the boughs across the poles, overlapping them like feathers. Each layer hides the gaps of the one beneath it. The needles rustle softly as you work, creating a soothing whisper that mingles with your breath. You press the boughs firmly, adjusting angles so the branches lie smooth and flush against the roof frame. When one slips out of place, you tuck it deeper, weaving its end under another branch. This creates a living net of greenery, all working together to keep the cabin warm. As you crawl across the rafters, you remember a quiet detail shared in old winter storytelling circles. Some trappers claimed you could tell when your roof was well insulated if a squirrel refused to steal your boughs. If a squirrel dared to take them, it meant your construction was too inviting for wildlife. The idea seems humorous, yet as you glance at the nearby branches, you half expect a curious squirrel to appear. None do. You smile faintly, taking it as a good sign. When the first layer covers the entire roof frame, you climb down and step back to inspect your work. The spruce boughs create a textured, natural mat that softens the harsh lines of the rafters. Their deep green color contrasts beautifully against the pale snow. The roof already looks warmer, as though it holds its own breath in anticipation of the coming cold. But the work is not finished. To trap heat effectively, mountain men added multiple layers of natural materials. Each layer served a purpose. Some blocked wind, others absorbed moisture. Some tightened the structure. You gather more spruce branches, along with long strips of bark peeled from fallen logs. The bark feels tough and slightly flexible, with ridges that catch the light. As you carry them to the cabin, small chunks of frozen resin cling to your gloves. You climb back onto the roof and begin laying wide sheets of bark across the boughs. You place them like shingles, overlapping each piece so water and snow slide downward instead of pooling. The bark hardens quickly in cold weather, creating a surprisingly reliable barrier. Early trappers noticed this too. In several handwritten notes passed among remote camps, builders recommended using bark that had dried naturally on fallen trees, claiming it curled less than freshly stripped pieces. You can see why as you press a flat sheet into place. It sits neatly, ready to hold strong through winter storms. As you place more bark, you hear a faint tapping deeper in the woods, perhaps a woodpecker searching for insects, perhaps ice cracking on a distant branch. The sound echoes gently across the clearing. You pause to listen, letting the stillness settle comfortably around you. The forest holds its breath while you work, watching with silent patience. You tie the bark sheets down using narrow strips of flexible root and dried grass braided together. The fiber winds tightly around the rafters, binding the bark snugly to the roof's frame. Your hands move quickly now, weaving and tying with practiced efficiency. The cold air pinches your fingertips, urging you to work even faster. As you secure the final sheets, your mind drifts to a topic often examined by scholars studying primitive architecture. They discuss whether early cabin builders intentionally aimed for layered insulation systems or simply added materials until the structure felt warm. Evidence remains scattered. Some cabins show careful layering, others look more haphazard. You lean toward the idea that necessity shaped their methods. When the cold threatened, people expanded their creativity without worrying who would analyze their work centuries later. You clamber down from the roof once more and gather the final set of materials. Dead grass bundled into thick knots, strips of animal hide trimmed from older pelts, and tufts of dried cattail fluff gathered near the frozen stream. Each plays a role in finishing your roof, sealing the tiny gaps that bark and branches leave behind. You climb the cabin again and crouch low, pushing the grass into narrow spaces where light still filters through. The grass forms dense mats, perfect for insulation. You press the cattail fluff into even smaller gaps. The soft fibers expand slightly as they settle, filling cracks that might otherwise invite the winter wind. As you work, a soft snowfall begins drifting down from a pale cloud above. The flakes land on your coat, melting slowly as your body stays warm from the effort. You take your time with the hide strips. These weather-resistant pieces help protect the roof's ridge where water and snow gather most easily. You stretch each strip across the upper beams and tie it securely. The hides lie flush against the bark, creating a final protective barrier. In some remote winter settlements, elders used to say that well-placed hides kept the soul of the roof from leaking away. You chuckle at the thought, but cannot deny how useful they are. By the time you finish tying the last knot, your legs feel tight from crouching on the angled beams. You climb down carefully, your boots making soft, muted thuds against the logs. When you stand at the base of the cabin and look upward, the roof appears full and strong, layered with natural textures that blend gracefully into the wilderness around you. The green of spruce branches peeks out beneath the bark, the grass fibers close off tiny cracks, and the hide straps create clean, dark lines along the ridge. You step backward into the clearing, snow crunching softly beneath your feet. The cabin looks more complete than ever. No longer a fragile frame exposed to the sky, it now stands with a sheltering top, sturdy enough to shrug off the first storm and strong enough to bear the heavy snows of deep winter. You let out a long, steady breath, watching the mist rise slowly. The roof you built today carries the memory of every branch, every strip of bark, every fiber woven into place. It is a patchwork of effort and instinct, much like the work of the mountain men before you. You brush your gloves together, scattering bits of bark dust into the air. The cabin waits quietly, ready for the next steps. Its voice may be silent, but its presence feels warmer already. And now, for the first time, it begins to resemble a true home beneath the winter sky. You walk slowly toward the cabin's entrance, or rather the gap where the entrance will soon be. Snow shifts softly beneath your boots as you approach the unfinished threshold. The walls stand solid, the roof sits proudly overhead, and the hearth waits patiently for its first flame. But without a door, this place cannot hold warmth. A doorway open to the winter air is an invitation for cold to roll inside, like an uninvited guest settling by the fire you worked so hard to build. Mountain men understood this deeply. Even the simplest shelter needed a dependable door, one that kept heat inside and danger outside. You step through the opening, letting your fingers trace the edges of the logs forming the frame. The wood feels cold and firm, a reminder that every part of this structure has endured the breath of winter before becoming part of your home. You stand in the doorway and imagine a wooden door swinging inward, creaking slightly, closing tightly with a hand-carved latch. The thought brings a faint sense of pride. You can almost hear the soft click of the latch locking into place. To build that door, you will need boards, thick, sturdy boards that fit closely together. You gather your tools and walk to the pile of logs left from earlier work. One long log sits half buried in the snow, its bark already stripped. You brush the snow away and roll the log slightly so you can inspect it. The grain looks straight, the core firm. A good candidate for splitting into planks. You lift your axe and draw a steady breath. Mountain men did not have sawmills or planers. They split boards directly from logs, leaving rough edges that carried the marks of their tools. You swing the axe downward with measured force, letting the blade bite deep into the wood. The log shudders slightly under the impact. You strike again, widening the initial split. After several swings, you wedge the blade into the crack and use a wooden mallet to drive it deeper. The log begins to open, the sound of tearing fibers echoing softly across the clearing. You work patiently, expanding the split until the log separates into two thick halves. Each half can be shaped into usable boards. You set one aside and begin shaving the other with your draw knife. Long curls of pale wood fall at your feet, gathering like soft ribbons across the snow. You work with consistent strokes, smoothing the inner surface until it lies flat. The board will not be perfect, but perfection is not the goal. Strength, fit, and simplicity matter more. While you shave the board, you recall something you once read in a preserved trapping manual from the late 19th century. The writer stressed that a door should always open inward. If snow piled against it from outside, an outward swinging door would trap the occupant inside. It seems an obvious detail now, but in deep winter, such small oversights could be deadly. You finish smoothing one board and lean it gently against the cabin wall. Then you begin splitting the next. The cold air stiffens your fingers between swings, so you stop periodically to warm your hands near the fire. The flames welcome your palms with soft, rising heat, and for a brief moment you close your eyes, enjoying the comfort. Once your hands recover, you return to the log and continue working. The rhythm becomes familiar. Strike, wedge, split, carve, smooth. As the second board takes shape, snowflakes drift down from a pale cloud above. They melt instantly where they touch the warm surfaces near your fire, but settle lightly on your sleeves and shoulders. You brush them off and keep going, focused on the door that must soon take form. With several boards shaped, you arrange them side by side on the snow, forming a rough rectangle. The edges do not match perfectly, but they align well enough to create a tight door once joined. You kneel beside them and gather some spare wood to use as horizontal braces. You select 3 sturdy pieces and trim their ends until they lie neatly across the width of the door boards. You drive wooden pegs through the braces and into the boards, creating a firm bond. As you hammer each peg into place, the boards pull together, tightening until they hold as one solid piece. The door grows heavier with each step, becoming something that feels grounded and real beneath your hands. A quiet memory surfaces as you work. An old mountain anecdote describes how some trappers carved tiny symbols or initials into their doors. A simple mark of ownership, a way to remind themselves that even in the vast wilderness, something belonged to them. You glance at the clean surface of the door and decide you will carve your own mark later, once everything is finished. Now comes the latch. Mountain men often crafted latches from small, curved branches or leftover pieces of scrap wood. You choose a sturdy piece of pine and carve it until it resembles a smooth, rounded handle. Then you shape a second piece for the latch bar, trimming it carefully so it pivots easily on a wooden peg. You fasten the handle to the interior side of the door, securing it with two small pegs. Then you attach the latch bar using a thicker peg, allowing it to swing freely. When you lift the latch and let it fall, it clicks lightly against the wood. The sound is soft but pleasing, like a whisper of readiness. Now you must create hinges. In the absence of metal, mountain men relied on simple wooden hinges that functioned surprisingly well. You carve a pair of sturdy hinge blocks from leftover timber and shape-matching slots in the door frame. Each hinge piece must interlock with its partner, allowing the door to swing smoothly. You work slowly, testing each hinge block before fastening it. When everything fits, you lift the heavy door by its edge and carry it toward the entrance. The weight challenges your grip, but you brace it against your knee and slide it into position. Snow shifts beneath your boots as you adjust the alignment. You press the hinges into their slots, tapping them gently with your mallet. They settle into place with a muted thud. The moment feels strangely ceremonial. You grasp the door by its handle and ease it forward. It swings slowly inward, scraping lightly against the snow. You close it fully. The latch falls into place with a clean wooden click. The cabin darkens slightly inside, shielded from the open sky. For the first time, the space feels enclosed. You pull the door open again and examine the fit. A narrow strip of cold air sneaks through the lower edge, but that can be sealed later with moss or hide. You test the door repeatedly, opening and closing it at different angles. Each time, it moves with steady resistance, a sign that the hinges hold firm. The sound of the latch clicking becomes the new heartbeat of your cabin. You listen to it with a quiet smile, letting the satisfaction sink in. The door is simple, rough, and uneven in places, but it is yours. It transforms the cabin from a drafty shell into a true dwelling, capable of keeping the winter winds at bay. You step outside into the clearing and close the door behind you. The sound is soft but distinct. The cabin now stands with a voice, a gentle wooden exhale that signals strength and shelter. The sun slips lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the snow. You stand quietly for a moment, absorbing the stillness. Inside the cabin, warmth will soon gather. Outside, the world becomes colder with every breath of wind. You place your hand on the door's rough surface and feel the grain beneath your glove. This door will protect you. It will guard your nights, your fire, your dreams. In the mountain wilderness, that is no small gift. You step back, letting the door settle into its frame, ready to face the winter that waits patiently beyond the trees. You step inside the cabin again, letting the new wooden door settle behind you with a quiet thump. The interior feels dim but sheltered, the kind of dimness that hints at warmth rather than darkness. Your boots press into the uneven layer of snow that still covers the floor. Here, inside these rising walls, you can feel the cold travel upward from the ground more intensely than anywhere else. It wraps around your ankles, snakes through your boots, and settles deep into your bones. Mountain men knew this sensation all too well. A poorly insulated floor could drain heat faster than a cracked wall or a leaky roof. You stand still for a moment, letting the chill serve as your reminder of what must come next. The floor needs to change. You kneel and scoop a handful of snow from the cabin floor, watching it crumble into crystals against your glove. Your breath drifts across it in a thin ribbon. The ground beneath is frozen hard, as unyielding as stone. You take your shovel and begin clearing the snow layer by layer. The scrape of metal on ice creates a steady rhythm, echoing off the wooden walls. With every shovel full you toss aside, the dark earth reveals itself a little more. Soon the cabin's interior feels like a shallow excavation site. Clods of frozen soil jut through the thinning snow, and the air inside grows slightly warmer without the reflective cold of the snowpack. According to detailed notes left by fur traders who lived through harsh northern winters, frontier builders often tamped their cabin floors until the soil was packed like hammered clay. This created a stable base that resisted shifting during the changing seasons. You decide to do the same. You set the shovel aside and use the back of your axe head to pound the earth, striking repeatedly until the soil compacts. Each blow sends a dull tremor through your arm, but the process feels grounding, almost symbolic. You imagine the mountain men doing this exact task by lamplight, while the night froze everything outside. Their determination shaped their survival, and now yours answers theirs. Once the soil begins to level out, you gather handfuls of loose earth from outside the cabin and scatter them across the interior. You tamp these patches as well, filling dips and flattening ridges. The floor becomes more uniform with each step of your work. You kneel to smooth the surface with your palms, pressing it down like soft dough. Bits of earth cling to your gloves. You wipe them clean on your coat and continue shaping the ground. But a tamped earth floor alone would still radiate winter cold. The mountain men understood this instinctively, so they added layers that trapped heat. Some used mats of woven grass, others laid spruce boughs, and many spread hides across the ground to create a barrier between their bodies and the frozen earth. You rise and step outside the cabin, searching for the materials that will become your own foundation of warmth. Near the tree line, tall golden grasses poke through the snow in stiff, delicate clumps. You bend down and gather several handfuls, snapping the stalks cleanly near the base. The dry grass rustles softly in your grip. You collect more, piling bundle after bundle into your arms. When your load grows too full, you drop it beside the cabin entrance and return for another round. When you have enough to cover the entire floor, you step inside and shake out the bundles. The grass falls in long threads that spread naturally across the packed soil. You kneel and begin arranging the stalks evenly. As you work, you remember a small detail often mentioned in winter survival stories. Some long-forgotten trappers believed that grass gathered after the first frost contained a special toughness that resisted mildew. Whether the claim holds any truth is uncertain, yet as you sort through the stalks, you notice how crisp and firm they feel. You add more grass, layering it until the earth begins to disappear beneath a woven yellow mat. Your fingers brush across the surface, feeling its softness. This layer will block much of the cold, but you know it is only the beginning. Mountain homes often used multiple layers to counter winter's reach. You step outside again and walk toward a cluster of fallen logs where strips of bark lie half buried beneath snow. You peel back the snow and lift one long sheet. It feels stiff but flexible. You gather several more pieces, selecting those with wide, flat surfaces. When you return to the cabin, you lay the bark strips atop the grass. Their curved shapes fit together like puzzle pieces, forming a rustic mosaic of browns and greys. The bark adds structure, preventing your foot from sinking too deeply into the softer grass layer. The room grows darker as clouds slide across the sky outside. The dimness makes the space feel more enclosed, more intimate. You continue adjusting the bark pieces, pressing them down until they rest snugly against each other. Your movements slow slightly as the fatigue of the day begins to whisper through your muscles. Then you remember the hides. You walk to your pack and pull out the folded animal skins you have been carrying since the start of your journey. Thick, warm and supple, they hold the faint scent of smoke and tanned leather. Mountain men prized hides as portable insulation. They used them for bedding, clothing and flooring. A well-placed hide could transform a frigid corner into a welcoming place to sit or sleep. You unfold the first hide and spread it across the bark. It drapes beautifully, settling into the small dips and angles beneath. You smooth the surface with your hand, feeling its warmth even through your glove. You lay another hide beside it, then another, creating a broad, continuous layer. This time, as you step across the floor, the cold no longer surges sharply through your boots. A muted sensation replaces it, as if the winter air has retreated a few steps. You crouch low and rest your palm against the hides. They feel almost warm compared to the icy soil you worked on earlier. A quiet satisfaction warms your chest. To complete the insulation, you add a final touch. In many remote cabins, frontiersmen filled the edges of the floor where cold drafts slipped through with small tufts of cattail fiber or handfuls of moss. You gather some of the leftover moss and tuck it gently along the base of the walls. The soft green cushions press neatly into the cracks, sealing the last remaining points where cold might sneak in. When you finish, you stand slowly and let your gaze sweep across the interior. The cabin floor now looks inviting. The earth feels firm. The grass hidden beneath bark and hides creates a pliant cushion, and the space seems warmer even without fire. You take a few slow steps across it, listening to the muted sound beneath your boots. The harsh crunch of snow is gone, replaced by a soft, muffled thud. You kneel beside the hearth and place your palm near the floor once more. The cold rising from the soil feels gentler now, slowed by every layer you added. You tilt your head and listen for any draft that might have gone unnoticed. Only silence answers you. You lean back on your heels, breathing deeply, a warm sense of accomplishment settling inside you. The cabin feels different now. Not fully finished, not quite ready for winter's worst anger, but undeniably transformed. With a sealed floor beneath you and strong log walls around you, the building carries a new voice. It whispers calm, steadiness, and quiet protection. Outside, a breeze rustles through the trees, scattering snow from high branches. You glance toward the window gap where pale light slips through. Soon that window will hold its own frame. But for now, the glow it casts onto your newly insulated floor looks peaceful. You rise slowly and walk toward the door. When you open it, cold air rushes inside, swirling across your boots. Yet you do not flinch. The cabin now has a strength it did not possess before. A floor that carries warmth, a hearth awaiting fire, walls that block the wind. You step outside and look at the structure with renewed confidence. Tonight, should the temperature fall sharply, the ground inside will no longer steal heat from your body. Your work has woven comfort into a place that once belonged solely to the winter. And now, with the floor finally prepared, the cabin has taken another step toward becoming a true home. You stand just outside the cabin and gaze at the white world stretching around you. The roof sits sturdy, the walls sit tight, and the floor warms the space far more effectively than before. Yet even with all this careful work, one force remains unpredictable and capable of overwhelming everything you have built: snow. It drifts, piles, hardens, melts, freezes again, and sometimes behaves like a living creature crawling across the land. Mountain men spent half their winter days studying snow, the way a modern traveler might study maps. You take a slow breath and let the cold settle on your tongue. It is time to understand how snow works for you, and how it works against you. Fresh flakes fall from a pale sky, spiraling slowly, settling on your sleeves like tiny crystals. You watch them melt almost instantly from the heat of your body, but you know well enough that this softness is deceptive. A gentle snowfall can become a heavy burden within hours. You walk around the cabin, boot prints marking a steady circle, and examine the ground where drifts naturally gather. The wind slides through the clearing, shifting small patches of loose snow into rippling waves. You crouch to observe how it moves. The shapes tell you stories. Along the north side of the cabin, snow has already begun to collect in a long, narrow ridge. It forms a slope that leans into the wall, rising higher than the opposite side. According to early accounts recorded by wilderness travelers, hunters often used these natural drifts as extra insulation. When packed tight against a cabin wall, snow could actually serve as a cold barrier that protected the inside from wind. It sounds strange at first, the idea of using snow as a shield. Yet standing here, watching how it settles in a soft mound, you begin to see the practicality. You scoop up a handful of snow and press it together, forming a compact clump. It grows firmer as you squeeze it. Snow like this can trap air inside itself, slowing the movement of cold wind. You drop the clump and rise again, considering how best to encourage good drifts while discouraging dangerous ones. A curious memory rises in your mind. Some winter guides once claimed you could read the winter's mood by the first snowdrifts of the season. If they formed sharply against the cabin, winter would be harsh. If they spread loosely across the clearing, winter would be mild. There is no science behind such thinking, but the charm of it lingers. You smile faintly and glance at your own drift. It forms cleanly and firmly. Perhaps the season intends to test you. You turn your attention to the roof. Snow already rests in a thin layer, dusting the bark shingles and spruce boughs like powdered sugar. You know it will thicken soon enough. The angle of your roof will help shed the weight, but only if you check it consistently. Mountain men often used long poles to push snow off their roofs from the ground. You search the tree line for a pole that fits this purpose. In a cluster of bare sapling trunks, you find one tall, straight branch. You pull it free from the snow, shake loose the frost, and test its strength. It bends slightly but does not crack. A good tool. You rest one end of the pole against the roof and give a gentle push. Loose snow slides down, tumbling softly at your feet. You keep clearing until the roof looks clean again. Though the snow falls lightly now, the skies of winter can change in minutes. You have already seen clouds drift above this clearing in brooding grey masses earlier in the season. Some researchers who specialize in early frontier climate patterns suggest that sudden shifts in mountain weather created the need for proactive snow management. They point to journals describing storms that buried entire outbuildings overnight. You tilt your head to the sky, wondering whether a heavy storm waits just beyond the ridge. You move around to the windward side of the cabin. Snow sweeps past you in graceful streaks, leaving only thin trails along the wall. Here, the wind strips the flakes away before they can settle. That means you will need to reinforce this side differently. If snow will not settle naturally, you must create barriers that block wind without encouraging dangerous buildup. You gather fallen branches and lean them in a loose pattern along the wall, forming a natural windbreak. The branches catch drifting snow that would otherwise blow past, allowing just enough buildup to help insulate but not so much that it presses dangerously against the logs. You watch as a few flakes cling to the branches, a quiet reassurance. Next, you test the doorway. Even with the new door, snow might drift in front of it during a storm. Many trappers solved this by building a small snow wall a few steps away from the entrance. Not a solid wall, just a curved ridge that interrupted the wind. You gather a shovel and begin pulling snow into a crescent shape around the door. The snow is cold but malleable, and soon the curve stands knee-high. It looks simple, but you know its purpose well. It will slow the wind, encourage the snow to settle away from your entrance, and keep your path clear. As you work, a sudden gust pushes through the clearing. Snow from the treetops rains down in a shimmering cascade. You pause to listen. The forest crackles faintly as branches adjust under the weight of ice and snow. It is a sound that mountain men knew intimately, a reminder that snow carries moods and messages. A strange detail you once heard surfaces now. Some old hunters believed that if the snow fell in perfectly straight lines during a gust, it meant wolves were on the move. If it swirled in curling patterns, it meant the night would stay peaceful. You glance at the drifting flakes. They swirl gently, painting soft spirals in the air. You finish shaping the snow wall and step back, brushing your hands clean. The cabin now looks as though it is settling into its winter environment, learning to live with the snow rather than battle it. The white drifts around the base resemble the sleeves of a heavy winter coat, pulled tight to protect its core. You decide to walk a small perimeter around the clearing to observe the landscape more closely. Snow crunches beneath you at each step. The cold air nips your ears, and frost clings to your eyelashes. You follow a faint dip in the snow that leads toward the trees. There, beneath a thick branch, you discover a shallow pocket where snow has melted slightly from the warmth of the earth below. This pocket could become a hazard if a heavy snow load collapses into it. You take your shovel and fill in the cavity, packing the snow firmly until the ground lies level again. A packed surface prevents sudden collapses and helps distribute snow weight more evenly. Practical adjustments like this kept many cabins from sinking or shifting during deep winter. You walk back toward the cabin, feeling a growing sense of understanding. Snow is not only a force to manage, it is also a material you can shape, a creature you can guide, and sometimes a quiet ally. You stand near the hearth wall and look up at your roof again. Snowflakes drift across it delicately, settling without threat. You step inside once more and close the door behind you. The space feels quieter now, buffered on the outside by the work you have done. You sense the difference instantly. No sharp cold rushes through the floor. No loud drafts whirl through the gaps. The cabin feels settled in its snowy surroundings. You walk across the insulated floor and stand near the hearth. Your breath curls in faint, slow ribbons. The cabin's stillness deepens with each moment. You rest your hand against the wall, feeling how the wood holds its calm. Outside, the world remains cold, white, and open. Inside, the first hints of protection gather like warm thoughts waiting for a fire. Snow continues to fall softly across the clearing, but now it lands on a home that understands its behavior. And you, standing in the quiet shelter you shaped with your hands, feel the confidence of someone who can read winter like a familiar story. You move toward the hearth again, feeling the chill curl upward from the unlit stonework. The cabin stands strong now, with its roof layered and the walls sealed tight, but there is one challenge that can undo all your careful work if ignored: the smoke path. A fire burns warm, but if the smoke cannot rise and escape properly, the cabin becomes a choking box of fumes. Mountain men learned quickly that tending the draft inside a winter cabin was as important as tending the fire itself. You kneel beside the stone hearth and run your hands along its edges, imagining the invisible currents that will soon flow through this space. You stand and walk outside, studying the back wall where the chimney must rise. The stones you stacked earlier form a solid base, but now you need the chimney's throat and crown. You gather a set of small and medium stones, testing each one in your palm. Some feel gritty and dependable. Others feel fragile, likely to crack in repeated heat. You choose the sturdy ones, dropping them gently beside the hearth. In the journals of early fur traders, there are mentions of how a well-designed chimney could pull smoke cleanly upward, even during storms. One writer described spending hours adjusting the angle of stones until the draft responded the way he wanted. You think of that now, as you kneel and begin shaping the inner throat of your chimney. The first step is to narrow the space just above the hearth. You place 2 long stones on either side of the opening, angling them slightly inward. Then you stack smaller stones atop them, one by one, testing the way the air flows each time you add a layer. You strike flint briefly to produce a small flame, watching how its smoke rises. The smoke drifts upward in a slow, wavering ribbon before fading into the cold air. That is good, but not yet certain. You adjust another stone, tipping it a hair's breadth inward, then another. You test again. This time, the smoke travels more decisively upward. You nod to yourself. Slow improvement. As you work, you recall a curious story shared among mountain dwellers. They said that a chimney whispering at night meant the draft was perfect. A clearing, steady sound without sputtering or rumbling. The notion makes you smile. You imagine sitting near the hearth on a winter night, listening to that soft whisper as if the cabin itself breathes calmly beside you. You continue stacking stones, building the chimney higher. The stones grow colder the higher you reach, their surfaces biting at your gloves. The frost on them glints as the sunlight shifts. You press each one carefully into place, wedging small chips of rock between them to lock them tightly. The wall grows taller, inch by inch. When the chimney reaches waist height, you step back to test it again. You light a small branch at the hearth. Smoke rises in a steady line before drifting out of sight. The draft feels stronger now, having found a clear path upward. Still, A proper chimney must extend above the roof line. Otherwise, wind pressure will send smoke spiraling back into the cabin. You gather more stones, selecting the ones that fit together without wobbling. As you work, the sun climbs across the sky, casting long angles of light across the snow. The shadow of your rising chimney stretches beside you like a thin companion. You climb onto the roof carefully, carrying stones in small batches. Each trip demands balance, caution, and patience. You climb the rafters slowly, placing each stone within reach before settling back into position. From this height, the forest looks wider, the clearing calmer, and the cabin itself feels more connected to the land. You stand on the roof and begin extending the chimney upward. The wind brushes your face as you work, swirling around the stones and rattling the bark shingles beneath your boots. You anchor each new stone with smaller pieces, creating a tight column. The chimney grows taller, firm against the breeze. As you shape the crown, the topmost portion of the chimney, your mind drifts to the ongoing studies of wilderness architecture. Researchers still discuss why some early chimneys were square while others were circular or oddly tapered. Some argue that shape affected draft strength. Others believe the builders simply used whatever stones they could find. You look at your own structure and suspect practicality guided most decisions. Stones that fit became stones that stayed. You adjust the final pieces, shaping the crown so the opening angles slightly away from prevailing wind. This helps smoke lift instead of being pushed downward. You test the stability with a gentle shake. The stones remain firm, unmoved by your touch. Climbing down from the roof takes careful steps, each movement deliberate. When your boots finally meet the snow beside the cabin, you release a breath you did not realize you were holding. You step inside and kneel at the hearth, striking flint again. The tiny flame flickers upward. Its smoke curls, hesitates, and then rises cleanly up the chimney. You watch it disappear through the throat, leaving the air inside clear. You stand still for a moment, savoring the quiet success. The cabin feels different now, as if it has learned to exhale. You slowly move your hand near the draft's invisible path and feel the faint pull of air. The chimney draws quietly, confidently. To reinforce the lower section, you use a handful of mud gathered from the thawed soil near the stream. Though the ground is mostly frozen, you find patches softened by underground currents. You kneel and mix the mud with small bits of grass and grit, creating a thick mortar. You spread it carefully along the seams of lower stones inside the cabin, smoothing it with your thumb. Over time, this mortar will harden into a reliable seal. While you work, you remember a little-known fact mentioned in an old regional almanac. It claimed that mixing a pinch of ash into chimney mortar prevented cracks from forming in extreme cold. Whether or not that is true, you brush a thin layer of ash from the fire pit and add it to the mix. It cannot hurt, and it feels like honoring the quiet wisdom of those who came before you. Once the seams are sealed, you step back and admire the hearth again. The stones look sturdy, the chimney stands straight, and the draft flows without hesitation. The cabin now has a functioning heart, capable of warmth that will spread through every corner. You sit on one of the hides near the floor and close your eyes for a moment. The cabin feels peaceful. The faint breeze outside murmurs softly through the forest. But inside, everything holds still. The draft no longer steals warmth or sends smoke into the room. It moves upward like a silent guardian, carrying the fire's breath to the sky. You open your eyes and look around, seeing the space in a new light. With a proper chimney, the cabin can finally become a living shelter, a place where fire burns safely, a place where air stays clear, a place where winter no longer holds complete control. You rise and walk toward the door, touching the smooth wood before stepping into the open clearing. The chimney stands tall above the roof, a slender tower of stone shaped by your hands. Smoke will soon rise from it, marking the cabin as a warm spot in the deep cold. You feel the cold air against your face, crisp and clean. Behind you, the cabin breathes with steady confidence. You have given it a voice, a way for warmth to thrive and winter air to slip away. And now, with the draft mastered and the chimney ready, the cabin feels almost alive. You step back inside the cabin and let the quiet settle around you, a kind of stillness that feels thick and velvety. The door closes with a gentle thud behind you, muting the sounds of the forest. For the first time, the space feels truly enclosed. Warmth has not yet filled the room, but the promise of it lingers in the air. You stand near the hearth, imagining the firelight flickering against the logs, imagining the glow stretching into the far corners of the cabin. Yet even with sturdy walls, a strong roof, and a finished chimney, winter nights here have their own personality. They hum with strange noises, soft pulses, low murmurs that weave through the darkness and catch even seasoned mountain men off guard. You move deeper into the cabin, wondering what those sounds will be like tonight. You settle onto one of the hides on the floor and listen. At first, there is nothing but your own breathing. Then, slowly, the forest begins speaking again through the cabin walls. A faint groan from a distant tree drifting under the weight of ice. A sharp crack in the forest somewhere beyond the clearing. A rustle of snow sliding down a branch. These noises come softly, layered like delicate threads. They remind you that even while you rest, the wilderness continues shifting, adjusting, surviving. According to detailed field writings from early trappers, the first winter night spent in a new cabin often brought a mixture of pride and unease. Pride, because the shelter finally stood firm. Unease, because the wilderness outside seemed to press its ear against the logs, listening. You feel that sensation now. Not fear, just awareness. The cabin stands, but the world beyond it stands too. You hear the wind begin to rise. It brushes along the roof with a low hum, slipping across the bark shingles and spruce boughs. The sound reminds you of water flowing in a narrow channel. You tilt your head and close your eyes, letting the sound create a calm rhythm. Wind like this can be comforting if the cabin holds strong. It becomes a kind of lullaby, steady and predictable. The next sound comes from somewhere deeper in the woods, a distant howl, soft yet unmistakable. You open your eyes. Wolves. The sound rings long, drifting across the snow like a silver thread. It fades, then another responds from farther away. The wolves call to one another, their voices rising and falling in gentle arcs. Many early mountain journals mention nights exactly like this, when wolves sang beneath a moonlit sky. The writers often describe the sound as both eerie and beautiful. You understand that now. It does not threaten you. It simply belongs to the night. You lean your back against the wall and listen to the layers unfold. The wind hums above. The wolves call in the distance. The trees creak and groan softly. And beneath all of it, the cabin itself makes tiny sounds. The logs expand and contract with the cold, releasing faint pops or soft sighs. A curious detail from frontier folklore comes to mind. Some old trappers believed that a cabin's first night noises were signs of the structure settling into its new purpose. If the pops were sharp and frequent, it meant the logs approved of the warmth to come. If the sounds were few, the cabin needed time to adjust. There is no real truth to it, of course, but the thought brings a faint smile to your lips. You rise to your feet and walk to the door. You crack it open slightly, letting in a thin stream of cold air. Outside the clearing, the sky glows faintly with the reflection of moonlight on snow. Shadows stretch across the ground in gentle patterns. The breath of the forest feels alive, moving around the trees as if tracing old, familiar paths. You step outside and stand on the threshold, feeling the cold kiss your face. The wind carries strange whispers at night. Not voices, not warnings, just the shifting sound of winter rearranging itself. A rhythmic tapping catches your attention. You turn toward the far trees. The sound repeats, slow and hollow. It might be a branch striking another branch in the wind, or perhaps a piece of frozen bark dislodging itself rhythmically. You listen carefully. The tapping reminds you of a detail from a mountain lore collection. It described how some woodsmen interpreted such tapping as a sign of temperature changes. Rapid tapping meant rising cold. Slow tapping meant warming air. The idea has no scientific proof, yet as you stand in the doorway, you find yourself wondering which direction the temperature is heading. You close the door gently and return to the center of the cabin. The hides on the floor muffle your steps, creating a soft, comfortable silence. You sit again and let the atmosphere wrap around you. Night sounds create a landscape of their own, one that stretches beyond the logs but feels just as real. This is the world mountain men lived in every evening, whether sitting beside a fire or drifting into sleep. The cabin seems to breathe with you. Every sound outside passes through the wood and becomes part of the night's story. You imagine winter storms sweeping across the mountains. Imagine how the wind might scream against the walls. Some scholars exploring old frontier letters argue that the psychological strain of winter nights might have shaped how often mountain men reinforced their shelters. Others suggest that the solitude itself created heightened sensitivity to sound. You cannot say which interpretation is closer to the truth, but you know this. A winter night holds many voices. You lie back on the hide and stare upward at the shadowy ceiling of beams. The faint moonlight slipping through the window gap creates soft silver shapes above you. You close your eyes again. The wolves call once more distant now. The wind deepens into a stronger hum. A quiet crack travels through the logs overhead. These sounds become a slow, soothing cadence. They steady your thoughts, pulling you deeper into a peaceful focus. You inhale slowly. The air inside the cabin carries the scent of bark, dried grass, and cold stone. A pleasant blend, almost earthy and grounding. You imagine how it will smell once a fire burns in the hearth, filling the room with smoke and warmth and the faint sweetness of resin. That future smell feels as real as the present moment. You sit up again and place your hand against the wall. The logs feel cool but reliable. You think of how many winter nights mountain men spent just like this, listening to the outside world move around them. They learned to recognize the distant crunch of snow under an animal's paws, the shifting snap of ice in the river, the sigh of cold air slipping through tree limbs. These sounds guided them, reassured them, and kept them alert in the darkness. A soft thud catches your attention. It is small, almost insignificant, probably a clump of snow falling from a branch onto the roof. You wait for another. It comes, a faint pat against the bark. Then silence again. The roof holds steady, shedding the weight as it should. You feel a deep, growing comfort. The cabin does not resist the night sounds. It blends with them. The structure and the wilderness exist in a quiet harmony. This night is not hostile. It is simply alive. You let yourself sink onto the hides once more, the floor warm beneath you. The forest continues its chorus in gentle waves. The roof sighs softly. And you, wrapped in this new shelter, feel the serenity of winter settling into your chest. These are the night sounds of the wild. And tonight, they belong to you just as much as they belong to the mountains. You rise slowly from the floor, stretching your arms until the muscles warm beneath your coat. The night sounds drift softly outside, but your thoughts turn toward another challenge that mountain men confronted long before the worst storms arrived: food storage. In a landscape ruled by frost, food can freeze solid within hours. Meat becomes hard as stone, fat loses its pliancy, and vegetables, if you have any, turn brittle. You step toward the door and open it just a sliver. A cold ribbon of air slips across your face. This is the kind of cold that keeps things fresh, yes, but only if you learn how to use it. You step into the clearing and breathe in the crisp morning air. The sky above glows faintly with the pale color of dawn. Frost clings to every branch, every rock, every small tuft of grass that still stands above the snow. As your boots crunch through the fresh powder, you take in the vast stillness and think about the mountain men who walked through similar mornings, carrying packs full of meat they had to protect from animals, thieves, and the stubborn grip of the winter itself. You make your way toward the edge of the trees where a small mound of snow covers the earth. Beneath that mound lies a shallow pit you dug the day before, a simple storage hole designed to take advantage of the natural refrigeration of the frozen soil. According to several surviving frontier records, trappers often stored their supplies underground, not to keep them cold but to keep them from freezing too quickly. A deep freeze made food harder to portion, cook, or even pry apart with a knife. You brush the snow aside and kneel, lifting the layer of pine boughs that hides the pit. Cold air billows upward, carrying the sharp scent of frozen soil. Inside the pit, wrapped in hide, lies a small bundle of dried meat. You lift it carefully, feeling its weight. It remains firm, but not rock solid. Good. The pit is doing its job. As you inspect the bundle, a faint detail from oral frontier stories comes to mind. Some old woodsman insisted that burying meat alongside certain evergreen branches kept scavengers away because of the strong resin scent. Whether true or not, the scent rising from your storage pit is crisp and sharp enough to sting your nose. You cover the pit again and move deeper into the forest, searching for a place to build a larger cache. Mountain men built caches in different ways. Some raised their supplies in high wooden platforms to protect them from wolves and bears. Others built small storage huts away from their cabins, hiding them behind trees or rocky ridges. A few preferred cold cellars dug beneath log covers. You wander for a moment, scanning the forest floor. You find a spot where the ground dips slightly, sheltered by several tall pines standing close together. Their trunks form a natural ring, blocking some of the wind. This looks like a place where a storage structure could be tucked quietly out of sight. You kneel and brush a layer of snow aside, testing the soil. The earth beneath is frozen but not too rocky. With a shovel or the edge of your axe, you could carve out a small cellar here. Before you begin digging, you gather large branches fallen from the pines overhead. You drag them into a pile near the chosen spot. They will serve as the top cover of the cache. As you collect them, your ears pick up a faint rustle in the underbrush. A hare darts across your path, leaving a dotted line of footprints behind. You watch it vanish into the forest. Its presence recalls an interesting note from a preserved winter guide, describing how small game often revealed the safest paths through deep snow. Their tracks showed where the surface was firm and where hidden hollows lay beneath. Back at your chosen location, you begin carving into the earth. The frozen ground resists at first, forcing you to drive your boot heel into the shovel repeatedly. Chunks of dirt break loose in thick slabs. Your breath becomes heavy, drifting into the air like pale smoke. As you work, a question once explored by wilderness historians floats through your mind. They continue to debate whether early mountain men stored food more for convenience or out of constant fear of spoilage. To you, it seems the answer lies somewhere in between. Food in winter is precious, and every piece must be protected. You dig until the pit reaches waist depth. The walls are rough, uneven, but functional. You smooth the interior with your gloved hands, pushing loose soil into a more compact layer. When the pit is finished, you line the base with a thick layer of spruce boughs. The needles create a cushion that prevents the stored food from resting directly on the frozen earth. Their scent fills the cellar with a sharp aroma, one that might discourage curious animals. You return to the cabin and gather dried meat, smoked fish, and a small cloth bag of ground grains you brought with you from earlier travels. The bag rattles softly as you lift it, like pebbles shifting inside. You wrap everything tightly in hides and rope, then carry them back to the pit. Placing the bundle inside the cellar feels strangely satisfying. You lower it gently until it rests on the boughs. The pit swallows the bundle in its cool embrace. You cover everything with another thick layer of spruce, and finally with the branches you collected earlier. When the covering looks secure, you pile snow over the top, shaping it into a smooth mound that blends naturally with the surrounding terrain. You step back and study the mound. It looks like an ordinary drift, indistinguishable from others in the clearing, hidden in plain sight, just as mountain men preferred. Many experienced trappers trusted the snow itself as a guardian. Its weight concealed the scent of food, and its cold preserved the contents better than any man-made structure. You walk around the mound once more to ensure there are no loose edges or suspicious depressions. Satisfied, You turn toward the cabin again. On your way back, you pause near the stream, which is frozen almost entirely. Only a thin trickle of water runs beneath a veil of ice. You crouch and examine it. This trickle could serve as a natural refrigerator. Some trappers used cold streams to store perishable goods, lowering their bundles into deeper pools and anchoring them with stones. You test the ice with your glove. It feels firm today, but deeper water might work for fresh meat later in the season. The forest air grows still as you walk. Your breath fogs and swirls around your scarf. In the distance, you hear the soft crack of ice settling. You think of how the mountain men listened to such sounds to judge the safety of their surroundings. A deep, echoing crack meant danger. A soft, isolated snap meant natural shifting. When you reach the cabin, the door greets you like a familiar friend. You push it open and step inside. The room feels cold but welcoming. You let the door fall gently closed, brushing snow from your coat. You move toward the hearth and kneel near the stones. Food storage outside will keep you going, but the hearth will make your meals livable. You glance at the window gap. Pale light washes across the hides on the floor. You take a slow breath, letting the calm of the cabin seep into your bones. Your food lies protected beneath snow and earth. Your supplies rest quietly in their hiding place. The wilderness holds no immediate threat. You press your palm against the hearthstones. Their chill feels purposeful, waiting patiently for fire. You think of how the mountain men lived each winter day, balancing work and rest, danger and security, warmth and cold. And in this moment, with your caches sealed and your cabin standing strong, you feel aligned with their rhythm. The cabin holds its stillness, and through the walls you can hear nothing but the soft murmur of wind passing through the trees. Here, in the quiet of winter, your food sleeps safely beneath the snow, waiting for the cold nights to come. You stand near the hearth and rub your hands together, feeling the faint warmth generated by friction alone. The cabin grows more complete with each passing hour, but you know survival in the mountains demands more than walls and a roof. Out here, your clothing is more than something you wear. It is a portable shelter, a private cabin you carry on your back. Mountain men treated every layer of clothing with careful respect. They repaired it, reinforced it, and relied on it as fiercely as any structure they built. You step toward the door, open it, and let the cold roll across your cheeks. That sharp sting reminds you exactly why clothing mattered so much. You step outside and breathe deeply, letting the winter air settle against your skin. Snowflakes drift lazily through the clearing. You tug your coat tighter and adjust the collar. Even with your modern instincts, you can feel how a poorly chosen garment could turn a simple walk into a dangerous one. Mountain men learned from experience, from mistakes, and sometimes from hard lessons carved into their bones. You move toward the line of trees near the edge of the clearing. Hung over a low branch rests a strip of animal hide you cleaned the night before. Its surface glows faintly under the muted daylight, grain-textured and supple. You lift it in your hands, testing its flexibility. According to numerous accounts preserved in early journals, frontiersmen favored layered hide for outer garments because it resisted wind even when the temperature plummeted. The hide feels almost warm despite the cold air. You take the hide inside the cabin and lay it across a smooth log. Working with your knife, you begin trimming the edges. Thin curls of leather fall at your feet. The soft scraping sound blends with the distant hush of the forest. You shape the hide into panels for a cloak, imagining how mountain men stitched such garments with sinew or tough fiber. You reach for the roll of sinew you prepared earlier, its strands stiff and pale. When you moisten them lightly, the fibers soften immediately, becoming thread-like and flexible. You set the hide pieces together and begin stitching. Each pull of the sinew tightens the seam, closing the gap between panels. Your fingers grow numb after a while, and you pause to warm them near the fire. As the heat seeps into your palms, you remember something told in frontier cabins during long winter evenings. Some trappers believed that working with leather by firelight invited good fortune for travel the next day. Whether anyone truly believed it or simply enjoyed the tradition, you cannot say. Yet now, as you stitch near the hearth, the memory brings a small feeling of comfort. Once your hands regain their warmth, you return to your stitching. You fold the seams inward and reinforce the edges. The cloak begins to take shape. When you finish the last seam, you lift the cloak and drape it across your shoulders. It settles around you like a second skin, heavy but soothing. The hide blocks the cold instantly, trapping your body heat beneath it. You imagine walking through a whiteout storm wrapped in such a garment, and sudden admiration wells up for the mountain men who crafted similar layers from raw material and instinct. Next, you turn your attention to footwear. Your boots have served you well, but in deep winter, even sturdy boots lose their power without proper insulation. Mountain men lined their footwear with fur or dry grass, creating a barrier between their toes and the frozen ground. You gather a bundle of the leftover grass used for the cabin floor and sort through it for the softest strands. Sitting near the hearth, you stuff handfuls of grass into your boots. It fills the gaps, pressing lightly against the leather. You slide your foot inside and feel the difference immediately. The grass becomes a cushion, holding warmth and protecting you from the ice. You add a bit more until the fit feels snug but comfortable. As you work, your thoughts drift to a topic occasionally discussed by researchers of early wilderness life. Some debate whether mountain men preferred fur linings or grass bedding in their footwear, each option presenting advantages. Fur was warmer but harder to dry. Grass was easily replaced but less durable. The survival decision varied depending on the season, the terrain, and the individual trapper's habits. As your foot rests warmly inside the grass-lined boot, you appreciate the simplicity and effectiveness of the old method. You stand and walk across the cabin floor, testing your steps. The hides, grass, and bark cushion your boots, making each footfall soft. The warmth travels slowly up your legs. You feel ready to face the cold outside. But garments do not end with outerwear. Mountain men understood the importance of layered clothing long before the concept became modern wisdom. Inner layers kept sweat from freezing. Middle layers added insulation. Outer layers blocked wind. You gather a stack of old cloth strips you packed for repairs. They are worn but serviceable. You wrap them around your wrists and forearms, creating warm bindings. The cloth pulls snugly against your coat sleeves, sealing the gaps where heat usually escapes. You also fashion a simple scarf from another strip of hide, cutting it thin and long. You wrap it around your neck and tuck it beneath your coat. Its warmth gathers along your collarbone instantly. You pull the hood of your coat higher and let it drape over your head. Now you consider your hands. Gloves alone are not enough when you venture into deep forest trails. Mountain men often wore mittens made from fur, leaving their fingers warm but making fine tasks more difficult. For tasks requiring precision, they switched back to bare hands briefly, accepting numbness in exchange for control. You search your pack for a strip of old pelt and fold it into a simple mitten shape. After fixing the seams with sinew, you slide your hand inside. Warmth blooms instantly. You hold your hand up and inspect your work. The mitten fits loosely but comfortably. You make another for the other hand. When both are complete, you set them near the hearth, letting them warm before use. Satisfied, you step outside again. The cold greets you with a cool kiss, but your layered clothing repels most of the bite. The hide cloak rests across your shoulders like a small protective shelter. The grass inside your boots cushions your steps, your hands warm beneath the mittens. You stand still for a moment, feeling how the cold tries to find its way through your clothing but cannot quite slip past your defenses. This is the same feeling mountain men described in old stories when they spoke proudly of their winter layers. Their clothing was not a fashion, not a luxury. It was armor against a season that showed no mercy. A light breeze rustles the trees nearby. You listen carefully. A soft rustling in the underbrush catches your attention. A fox trots between the pines, its thick winter coat glowing faintly in the muted light. You watch the animal move gracefully, insulated by nature itself. Its presence brings a thought you have read before. Some early hunters observed foxes and wolves to inspire their own winter clothing techniques. They admired the layered fur, the way moisture shed off the surface, and the resilience of the animals in storms. You step carefully across the clearing, taking a slow walk to test your new garments. The wind glides past you but does not bite into your skin. Your breath floats in gentle clouds. Every movement feels warmer, safer. You glance down at your boots and smile slightly. Grass lining, hide cloak, cloth bindings, fur mittens. Together they transform you into someone ready to face the mountains with quiet confidence. When you return to the cabin, you step inside and close the door behind you. The air inside feels almost warm in contrast to the snowy world outside. You hang the cloak near the hearth for a moment, letting the hide dry, then sit on the floor and unwind the cloth bindings from your wrists. You press your palms together and close your eyes. Your clothing, simple as it is, feels like another layer of the home you build, a portable cabin that protects you anywhere the forest calls. And now, with your garments strengthened and your body shielded from the cold, you are ready for whatever winter chooses to bring. You wake before the sun rises, stretching slowly inside the cabin as the silence of early morning settles around you. The air inside is still cold, but it no longer slices into your lungs the way it once did. Your garments shield you, your floor shields you, your walls hold their ground. But today, you shift your focus to something far more subtle yet equally necessary: understanding the weather. Out here, winter changes moods without warning. A sky that looks harmless can erupt into a blizzard. A calm day can hide a freezing night. Mountain men treated weather like a second language, listening, watching, and interpreting every sign the wilderness offered. You step outside the cabin and breathe deeply. The clearing lies quiet beneath a pale dawn. Frost crystals glisten on every surface, catching the faintest hints of early light. The cold feels different today, sharper and more direct. You narrow your eyes and glance toward the horizon. Thin clouds smear across the sky in long strokes, almost like brush marks. According to notes meticulously written in old trapping journals, clouds stretched into long, flat shapes often signaled a coming shift in wind. It might bring warmth, it might bring a storm. Nothing out here is certain. You walk toward the tree line and pause beneath a tall spruce. The needles tremble slightly. The wind pushes in from the west in short bursts, not steady but pulsing. You hold your gloved hand out, letting the breeze touch your fingertips. Its rhythm feels too irregular for comfort. Something is shifting above the mountains. As you continue forward, you hear a distant cracking sound, sharp and echoing. It could be a branch shedding its icy weight. It could be the forest adjusting, but you pay attention to it. Mountain men learn that strange noises during calm weather often foreshadowed temperature drops. When cold air flows down from high ridges, the sudden pressure shift can make trees pop like distant gunshots. You reach the frozen stream and crouch beside it. The ice glimmers in soft blue hues. You run your glove lightly across the surface and listen. A deep, muted groan rises from the frozen water. Not a threatening sound, just a reminder that the freeze grows thicker. In some fragments of early winter lore, trappers claimed you could predict the week's weather by the tone of a frozen creek. A high ringing meant warming air. A low groan meant deeper cold ahead. You listen closely. The sound sits low, resonant, almost sleepy. Cold is coming. You rise again, watching your breath expand in the morning gloom. You scan the snow around you. The surface has changed overnight. The top layer looks smoother, shinier, as if it melted slightly the previous day and froze again. This thin crust forms when the air undergoes subtle warming followed by a quick drop. It makes traveling easier in some moments, but can also trap heat beneath the layer and create sudden soft patches. A small shape darts across your path. A squirrel leaps from one tree to another, chattering loudly. Its movements feel restless. You follow it with your eyes, noticing how it dives into a stash of pine cones, digs out a few, and carries them quickly into a hollow in the tree. The little creature moves with urgency, stuffing its winter pantry as if time grows short. In journals passed along between early settlers, there are descriptions of how animals often gave the earliest warnings of incoming storms. If they gathered food too quickly or stayed unusually still, a dramatic shift in weather often followed. You press your hands together, warming them through friction again. The cold creeps in with a steady persistence. You glance at the sky once more. The clouds have thickened since sunrise. Their edges look softer, blurred. Not storm clouds yet, but certainly messengers of change. You walk back toward the clearing, listening to the faint crunch of snow underfoot. As you near the cabin, you pause to study the treetops. They sway slightly, but not in unison. Some lean westward, others barely move. This uneven movement suggests swirling winds high above, the kind that often herald unpredictable weather. It reminds you of a debate some natural historians still explore today: whether frontier inhabitants truly predicted storms by watching the oscillation of treetops, or whether they simply convinced themselves they could. The varied accounts make the truth difficult to pin down, but as you stand here, watching the uneven sway, you suspect the old builders were paying closer attention than most give them credit for. You enter the cabin again and sit near the hearth, running your fingers along a smooth stone. Your mind wanders to another sign: the mountain men used, the snow's voice. Yes, snow has a voice. When it squeaks loudly underfoot, it often means the air is very cold and dry. When it crunches softly, temperatures hover near freezing. When it feels spongy or silent, a storm can be hiding just beyond the horizon. You step on the floor of snow you tracked in earlier. The sound is crisp, not squeaky, not soft. It suggests the air sits near the threshold of shifting. You stand and open the door once more. The wind has changed again. The air pushes against your face in a long, steady breath. No more short bursts. A shift from pulsing to steady pressure often signals a front approaching from the higher elevations. You lift your face, close your eyes, and let the air wash across your skin. The cold feels heavier now, almost weighted. It hints at snow. A pale bird flies overhead, gliding low. It circles the clearing once, then settles on a branch. Birds in winter rarely waste energy unless necessary. This one looks unsettled, peering around in short, quick motions. Another joins it. They sit close together, feathers puffed. In the wilderness, animals know long before humans do when the weather intends to shake its shoulders. Your own instincts sharpen. You pull your coat tighter and walk around the cabin to check your snow walls and supporting branches. The drift along the north wall has grown thicker overnight, insulated by the cold wind sweeping from the ridge. You pat the snow lightly. It is firm and well-shaped. The windbreak near the door still stands strong, its crescent curve encouraging drifts to form safely away from the entrance. You make another slow circuit around the cabin, looking for weaknesses. The roof looks solid. The chimney stands tall and straight. The walls hold their tight lines. Yet even with all these measures, weather remains a living challenge. You decide to prepare a small reserve of firewood inside the cabin. If a storm arrives, stepping outside for fuel could become treacherous. You collect several logs from the woodpile and stack them neatly near the hearth. Their bark flakes slightly, scattering crumbs of brown across the floor. You add smaller branches too, the kind that ignite easily. When you finish, the pile looks generous enough to last through a full night of heavy snow. Outside, the wind rises again, then softens. You listen. The alternating strength feels like the mountain breathing. You catch another faint crack in the forest, then a long rumbling slide of snow shifting on a distant slope. These sounds stir memory. You once read of a practice among experienced trappers, pressing their ear to the ground to listen for subtle tremors before a heavy storm. Ground vibrations sometimes reach the earth long before winds reach the cabin walls. You crouch and place a gloved hand against the snow. It feels cold, still, silent, hard to tell. But the quiet seems expectant, as though the land holds its breath. You rise again and step back into the cabin. You take a moment to steady yourself. Weather reading is not about certainty, it is about attention. Mountain men used every sense, every scrap of knowledge, and every observation to stay alive. You feel a connection to that now. The cabin is prepared. Your clothing is ready. Your food is stored. And your mind, sharpened by signs and sounds, understands that winter intends to move in soon with greater weight. You close the door gently. The room dims, wrapped in stillness once again. The world outside shifts and murmurs, but inside, you feel centered. Whatever the coming hours hold, you are listening, you are prepared, and in these mountains, that readiness is your greatest shelter. You sit quietly inside the cabin for a few breaths, letting the muffled hum of the wind settle against the walls. The signs of coming weather drift through your mind like slow falling flakes. Yet winter survival has never depended on instinct alone. Mountain men relied on one another whenever the wilderness allowed them to meet. Trading posts, no matter how small or remote, acted as warm pockets of shared knowledge. Stories moved between strangers, techniques passed from veteran hands to younger ones, and tricks of wintercraft traveled farther than any single trapper could. As you rise from the floor and step toward the door, you imagine walking toward one of those distant posts, prepared to learn something new or offer something in return. You pull on your cloak and mittens, tighten the bindings around your wrists, and step outside. The cold air kisses your face immediately, a reminder that knowledge itself is a form of warmth out here. You begin walking toward the far side of the clearing where a narrow path leads deeper into the forest. Snow crunches under your boots in a steady rhythm. The trees stand like silent guardians, their trunks tall and dark against the pale ground. The path takes you between two rocky ridges. The stones glimmer faintly with frost. In the distance, thin smoke spirals into the air. You pause for a moment, exhaling slowly. Smoke this early in the morning often means someone has already kindled a fire at a trading shelter or camp. You walk a little faster, feeling curiosity stir in your chest. As you approach the small outpost, you notice a simple wooden lean-to built against a broad tree. A fire burns inside, its glow flickering softly. A few figures move around it, bundled in heavy coats and fur-lined hoods. When they notice your approach, one of them raises a hand in greeting. You step inside the circle of warmth. The fire crackles, sending cinders upward in lazy spirals. The smell of wood smoke wraps around you like a cloak. One of the travelers nods toward you and gestures for you to sit. You lower yourself onto a rough stump near the flames, letting the heat seep into your legs. According to detailed accounts preserved in old fur company records, these trading gatherings often served as informal winter classrooms. Men shared knowledge freely because doing so meant more of them survived. You smile as one of the strangers offers you a small tin cup of warm broth. You accept it gratefully and take a slow sip. The warmth spreads through your chest. The first traveler speaks, telling you about a nearby ridge where deep snow collects dangerously after heavy storms. He explains how he learned to recognize the early signs of shifting snow by the tone of the wind as it sweeps across open ground. You listen closely, storing his words like flint sparks. Knowledge like this is as valuable as food. Another traveler, older and grizzled, taps the handle of his knife against a log. He shares a practice he swears by. He says that when preparing to build a cabin or repair one in midwinter, he always carries a small bundle of crushed sage in his pocket. Not for scent, but because the moment moisture in the air thickens before a storm, the herb sticks together. The idea sounds almost mystical, but you know better than to dismiss wilderness wisdom. In remote places, intuition often blends with experience in strange but effective ways. You sip your broth again while the conversation continues. One traveler describes how he lines his winter moccasins with alternating layers of fur and dry moss, insisting that the moss wicks away ice crystals better than grass. Another talks about building a quick smoke shelf inside a chimney to prevent downdrafts on stormy nights. The details might seem small, but each piece fits into a larger puzzle of survival. A question from the group drifts your way. They ask about your cabin, how high your chimney stands, what insulation you chose for your roof, whether you carved your notches deep or medium. You describe your work carefully. They nod, listening with interest. A quiet moment follows before one traveler offers a suggestion. He tells you that adding a thin layer of clay mixed with ash around the inner lip of the hearth can help the fire catch more easily on cold mornings. You store that detail away, promising yourself you will try it soon. As the fire burns, the group begins exchanging stories more freely. Someone recounts a tale of a winter so cold that the sap inside fallen logs burst into tiny shards that sparkled in the morning light. Another mentions watching an owl land silently on fresh snow, barely sinking despite its size. You listen, struck by how even these simple observations carry hidden lessons about weight, pressure, and the texture of winter itself. As the hours pass, you find yourself reflecting on something scholars still debate when studying frontier life. Some argue that these trading posts acted mainly as places of commerce. Others believe they were essential centers of knowledge, where survival techniques blended and evolved rapidly. From where you sit, listening to the crackle of the fire and the soft cadence of shared wisdom, you lean toward the latter. This exchange feels like the beating heart of mountain life. Eventually, the conversation shifts to humor. One traveler laughs about the time he tried to store dried fish near a stream, only to return in the morning and find each piece encased in a perfect shell of ice. He jokes that nature simply wanted to preserve his dinner more carefully than he did. Another tells a playful story about a friend who claimed he could predict storms by how loudly his beard crackled with frost. The group chuckles softly, the sound warm and human against the cold silence outside. When the fire burns low, you stand and thank the travelers for their company. You feel lighter in spirit than when you arrived. The cold no longer presses as sharply against your bones. You say your goodbyes and step back into the clearing. The wind brushes softly across your face as though welcoming you back. The walk home feels shorter than before. With every step, you turn over the wisdom shared at the fire. Climate signs, construction tricks, clothing lore, hidden dangers of snow, and the quiet art of reading the wilderness. These details transform your understanding of the land. They turn survival into something more graceful, more intuitive. When your cabin comes into view, you pause for a moment. The smoke of the trading fire still clings faintly to your cloak, blending with the cold air around you. You step inside and close the door gently. The quiet welcomes you like an old friend. You kneel near the hearth and rest your hands on the stones. You picture the travelers sitting by their own fires tonight, sharing more stories, exchanging more knowledge. You feel connected to them, to the long line of winter survivors who traded wisdom not for profit but for life itself. Your cabin stands stronger now, not because of new logs or new tools, but because of what you carry in your mind, wisdom that warms you as surely as any fire. And in these mountains, shared knowledge has always been a form of shelter. You step back from the hearth, letting the warmth of the earlier conversations linger in the air. The quiet returns slowly, settling around you like snowflakes landing on still water. But knowledge alone cannot keep a cabin standing through the long stretch of winter. Storms will come. Wind will seep through cracks you missed. Snow will fall in heavy sheets that challenge your roof. And even the strongest shelters will need unexpected repairs. Mountain men knew this with absolute certainty. They built sturdy homes, but they also built themselves into problem solvers. You take a steady breath, step outside once more, and prepare for whatever the rising winter decides to demand. A thin wind grazes your face as you walk around the cabin. It is early morning again, the sky washed with pale grey light. Last night's signs still echo in your memory. Temperature drops, animal restlessness, uneven treetops. All of it hinted at a shift. You pause and listen. The forest hums differently today. The air feels heavier, almost swollen. The snow beneath your boots no longer crunches sharply. It feels muted, softer. You kneel and press your glove into the surface. Moisture lingers just beneath the top layer, a sign that a storm might be approaching from the ridges. You straighten your coat and walk toward the woodpile. Some of the logs have shifted under the weight of new snow. You brush the snow off and stack the logs again with deliberate care. As you do, you recall something preserved in a wilderness guide compiled from early trappers' letters. They often kept half their firewood inside the cabin, but the other half outside in a tidy stack. If a storm blocked the door or buried part of the cabin, the exterior pile could still be reached from another direction. You nod to yourself and divide your firewood evenly, moving a few logs to the backside of the cabin where wind seldom gathers. The wind picks up as you finish stacking the wood. It slips through the trees in long, wavering sighs. A low groan echoes from somewhere deeper in the forest. You turn sharply. It sounds like a heavy branch shifting under ice. The noise grows louder, then stops abruptly. You scan the tree line until you see a limb sheathe itself in snow and snap free from its trunk. It drops soundlessly into the drifts below. You step closer, watching how the snow swallows it. These fallen branches serve as warnings. Their sudden drop often means that ice buildup has reached a dangerous point. The roof must be checked before the storm strengthens. You walk to the cabin and lift your pole, the same one you have been using to clear snow. You position it under the roof edge and push upward gently. Loose snow slides down in soft sheets. You clear the entire front edge, then move to the back. The bark shingles and spruce boughs hold firm beneath the shifting load. As you work, you remind yourself of a straightforward detail that appears repeatedly in frontier journals. Roof maintenance was never optional in mountain winters. Those who neglected it paid dearly. With the roof cleared, you check the corners where the walls meet. You kneel beside each joint, running your fingers along the chinking. Moss holds strong in most places, but you find one small patch where the fibers have pulled loose from repeated freezing and thawing. Cold air slips through in a thin, familiar thread. You press your palm against it. The draft feels sharp enough to warn you. You collect a handful of spare moss from your earlier work and knead it between your palms until it softens. Then you press it firmly into the gap, pushing it deep with the back of your knife handle. The moss expands slightly, filling the crack with fresh insulation. You wipe a streak of sap from your glove and smile faintly. Even small repairs like this can mark the difference between a warm night and a miserable one. You circle to the opposite corner and check again. A small piece of bark used during chinking has shifted. You fix it, securing it with a thin sliver of wood that you press firmly into place. The cold wind tries to slip through, but the new patch holds. A sudden gust stirs the clearing, sweeping across the snow in swirling patterns. You glance up as a cloud of fine powder lifts from the ridge and sparkles in the muted light. The wind whistles through the narrow branches, singing a tune that feels sharper than before. You know this sound. It often appears before heavy snowfall. In one early wilderness diary, a trapper described this whistling wind as a messenger of deceiving calm. Gentle at first, it would rise into a fierce gale without warning. You continue around the cabin, checking each timber, each corner notch, each section of the wall. As you pass the chimney, you pause and run your glove along the stones. They feel cold but stable. Still, you crouch to inspect the mortar. Tiny cracks form in the upper layers where the night frost has pressed against the stone. They are not wide, but if left alone, they can widen quickly in a storm. You gather a small batch of the clay and ash mixture you used earlier and apply it carefully, smoothing it over the cracks with your thumb. The forest grows quieter as you work. Even the birds retreat deeper into the trees, leaving only faint traces of movement. The silence reminds you of a story repeated often in mountain cabins. Some hunters claim that when birds stop calling, the mountains hold their breath. A storm, they said, walks silently before it roars. You straighten slowly, glancing at the sky, and feel a subtle tension in the air that echoes the old tale. Inside the cabin again, you take a moment to warm your hands by striking a small flame. The air grows a little warmer, and the tiny spark comforts you before fading. Repairs outside are done for now. But one final task remains: an extra layer of reinforcement around the most exposed wall. You collect several long branches, still flexible despite the cold. You lean them against the north wall, forming a lattice pattern. Snow begins to cling to them immediately. This extra layer will help break the wind and reduce the direct force on the logs. Mountain men often built such makeshift barriers during storm seasons, shaping them to resemble small wooden shields. Once the lattice stands firm, you step back and observe the cabin. It looks grounded, as though braced to face something that has not yet arrived. The clearing darkens slightly as clouds thicken overhead. You return to the door, pull it open, and step inside. The warmth of your floor insulation greets your boots. The walls stand quiet. The hearthstones wait calmly for flame. You hang your mittens near the fire pit, knowing they will need to be dry if the storm grows fierce. You take a slow breath and listen. Outside, the wind changes its voice. It shifts from a soft sigh to a low, steady breath, the kind that presses against the trees and warns hikers to seek cover. You close the door gently and latch it. In the dim interior, the quiet feels heavier. It has weight, meaning, presence. You sit on the floor, resting your hands on your knees, and reflect on everything you have done today. The repairs, the reinforcements, the careful listening. Mountain men lived by such vigilance. They did not fear winter. They prepared for it constantly. And now, as wind begins to hum louder across the clearing, you feel ready. Should the storm arrive in the next hour or linger until nightfall, your cabin stands strong, your walls are sealed, your chimney is sound, your roof is cleared, your wood is stacked, and your instincts, sharpened by the whispers of the forest, tell you that you have done everything in your power. The storm will come. It always does. But you will meet it inside a shelter built with patience, strengthened by wisdom, and repaired with your own careful hands. You sit quietly inside the dim cabin for a moment, listening to the slow shifting of the wind outside. The storm still waits at a distance, gathering its strength somewhere beyond the ridge. You sense it, but the danger has not yet arrived. A brief pause opens before you, like a breath between heartbeats, and in that moment your thoughts drift towards something more alive than timber or stone. Companions. Not people, though mountain men welcomed company whenever they found it. Instead, you think of the loyal creatures that shared the wilderness with them: dogs, pack animals, and the quiet presence of animals that unwittingly offered warmth in the coldest nights. You rise from the floor, pull your cloak close, and step toward the door to meet that warmer part of frontier life. You step outside, and the clearing greets you with crisp air and soft snow underfoot. The breeze holds a faint smell of pine and smoke drifting from your chimney. As you walk toward the edge of the trees, you whistle softly. A moment later, a familiar shape trots into view. A dog, thick-furred, sturdy, and wide-pawed for winter travel. The animal approaches with an eager wag of its tail, almost smiling in the way some dogs do. You kneel and run your hand along its back. The fur is cold on the surface but warm underneath, a small furnace wrapped in rough winter cloth. According to well-preserved writings from early trappers, dogs served as more than companions. They warned of prowling predators, carried light supplies, tracked wounded game, and offered warmth on nights so cold that a fire alone could not keep a man alive. Some accounts describe dogs curling beside their owners on frigid evenings, becoming living blankets that breathed warmth into frozen cabins. You feel that warmth now as the dog presses lightly against your knee. You stand and the dog follows you back toward the cabin. Inside, you sit near the hearth and pat the hide beside you. The dog settles into place, circling once before lying down. Its breath flows in quiet rhythms that blend with the muted hum of wind around the chimney. You watch steam drift upward from its warm fur as the cold melts away. The cabin suddenly feels less empty. Another memory returns from stories collected among frontier families. Some woodsmen spoke fondly of pack animals that refused to wander far from camp when storms approached. Horses and mules, they said, behaved strangely before severe weather. They stamped the ground more often, paced in tight circles, or shook their heads in restless warning. You think of the lone trading horse you once spotted near the ridge, how its ears twitched constantly, how it shifted its weight repeatedly before settling. Animals seem to hear the mountain's breath in ways humans cannot. You rise quietly and open the door again to let fresh air in. The dog lifts its head, nose twitching. Its ears stand tall. It sniffs the cold breeze with careful attention. You watch closely. Animals notice details you often overlook. Some modern researchers still discuss whether frontier people truly used animal behavior as a formal weather guide, or if they simply trusted long observation. The debate continues, but from your own experience, you suspect the truth lies in watching quietly and learning slowly. Your dog steps outside with you and stands at your side. The forest holds new sounds now. A distant crack echoes through the trees, sharper than before. The dog tilts its head and emits a low rumble deep in its throat. Not fear, just alertness. You place your hand gently on its side. The fur feels thick beneath your glove. You walk with the dog toward the edge of the clearing. Snow clings to the branches above, weighing them down until they bend toward the ground. A squirrel darts across the snow, chattering loudly. The dog watches it for a moment before returning its gaze to the forest. You sense something in the air too, a faint heaviness, a stillness that feels almost thoughtful. A curious fragment of winter lore surfaces in your mind. Some mountain men believed that dogs could see spirits in the trees when the snow grew very deep. It is a fanciful idea, more superstition than truth, yet it speaks to how intertwined human and animal lives became in the wilderness. You glance at your dog now, watching the way it scans the forest. Its eyes shine with awareness, not fear. It reads the world with instincts honed by countless days spent in winter. You kneel again and check the dog's paws. Snow sticks between the pads, forming tiny clumps that can freeze into painful shards if ignored. You brush them away gently. Many old frontier letters mention how dogs needed as much care as humans did in winter. Frozen paws, brittle fur, and hunger could weaken them quickly. In return for that care, the animals offered loyalty that no coin could buy. The dog licks your hand once, then presses its shoulder lightly against your leg. You stand and lead it back toward the cabin. Inside, you sit near the hearth again and let the dog settle beside you. The warmth growing between you feels like another layer of insulation, a warmth no fire can fully replace. You consider how mountain men often slept beside their dogs during winter expeditions. The animals curled close, sharing heat beneath blankets or hides. Their breathing created a soft rhythm that eased the edge of loneliness. Some accounts even describe trappers waking to find frost collected on a dog's outer fur while its inner layers stayed warm. You stroke your dog's back and feel the same layered heat. You rise to prepare a small meal of broth and dried meat. The dog lifts its head expectantly. You offer a portion, setting it near the hide. The animal eats with quiet gratitude, tail thumping softly. When finished, it settles again and rests its chin on your boot. As you watch the fireless hearth, you imagine lighting it soon. The dog beside you will likely shift closer, choosing the warmest patch of floor. Animals instinctively know how to conserve energy. They move little during storms, breathe more slowly, and sleep deeply. Watching them can teach you how to survive in the same calm, measured way. A soft tapping at the window gap draws your attention. Snow begins to fall again. Each flake sticks momentarily to the hide curtain before sliding down. The dog lifts its head, ears pointed. You look out. The clouds thicken across the sky, flattening into a heavy sheet. You close the window cover and sit once more beside your companion. The cabin feels smaller in a comforting way. The smell of hide, dried grass, cold air, and warm fur blend softly in the space. The dog sighs and stretches, pressing its back closer to you. You cannot help but reflect on how essential animal companionship has been across the history of winter survival. Horses carried heavy loads through deep snow. Mules plowed through difficult trails. Dogs alerted sleepers to approaching predators or strangers, and every creature provided warmth simply by being present. You place your hand on the dog's side again. Its breathing deepens as it drifts towards sleep. You feel the warmth radiating through your glove, a steady reminder that you are not alone in this quiet winter world. Outside, the wind presses gently against the cabin. Inside, the presence of your companion fills the silence with a reassuring calm. And as the first flakes of the coming storm whisper across the roof, you realize that warmth comes from more than fire, more than walls, more than hides. Sometimes, it comes from life itself. You sit beside your four-legged companion for a long moment, feeling the quiet pulse of warmth radiating through its thick fur. But winter has more than cold and storms to test you. It has a way of reaching into the body itself, slipping past layers of hide and wool. You know well that even the hardiest mountain men were not immune to the silent challenges of the season. Frostbite, chills, coughs that echo in the ribs, cuts that heal slowly in the cold. Inside these wooden walls, you must be your own healer. You rise slowly, stretch your back, and glance toward the corner where your small bundle of herbs and simple tools lies waiting. The dog watches you briefly, then returns to its restful curl as you step across the hide-layered floor. You kneel beside the bundle and untie the rope. Inside lies a modest collection of winter remedies, gathered from the forest or carried from your earlier travels. A small pouch of dried spruce tips, a strip of willow bark, a bundle of sage, still holding its faint aroma, a few pine resin nodules wrapped in cloth. Simple items, yet powerful in the hands of someone who respects their uses. According to descriptions preserved in frontier notes shared across generations, mountain men relied heavily on local plants to treat winter ailments. Spruce tips soaked in warm water eased throats, while willow bark helped with lingering aches. Pine resin served as both antiseptic and sealant for small cuts. These remedies were not magic, but they kept many trappers alive in remote places where no doctor could reach them. You pick up the pine resin first. Its surface glistens faintly in the filtered daylight. You warm it between your palms until it softens slightly. This sticky resin can seal small wounds and protect them from snow, ice, and dirt. You remember nicking your knuckles yesterday while carving a hinge block for the door. You peel off your glove and examine the faint cut. It looks pink around the edges, irritated from the cold. You apply a thin layer of resin across it. A sharp scent rises, clean and earthy. The resin quickly cools into a protective coat. You flex your fingers gently and smile. Small wounds can become dangerous in winter. Infection creeps faster when the body is fighting cold. You rewrap your hand in a cloth strip and pull your glove back on. From the bundle, you lift the dried spruce tips and sniff them. Their scent is bright and slightly sweet. You set a handful into a small pot, pour snow into it, and place it near the cold hearth. Soon, when you light a fire, this mixture will warm into a fragrant brew that once soothed countless mountain men through nights of coughing and tight chest. A memory rises from something you once read. Some trappers swore that spruce tea held the breath of the forest inside it, calming the lungs and lifting the weight of cold air. You like the imagery. It feels fitting. You stand and step outside to gather a few more materials. Snow crunches softly beneath your boots. The air feels heavier today, more humid, as though the storm sits just beyond sight. You walk toward a fallen log partly buried in snow. Beneath its bark lies a layer of powdery green moss. You scoop a handful into a pouch. Soft, absorbent, and soothing when warmed slightly, this moss was used to pad frostbitten skin or insulate cold feet. It also served as makeshift bandage when cloth ran out. You tuck the pouch away and walk toward the stream. Though most of it lies frozen solid, a small trickle of meltwater runs beneath an overhanging branch. You crouch and dip your gloved hand into the icy water. Clean water is crucial for winter health. Dehydration happens more easily in the cold than people realize. and mountain men often carried small containers of melted snow boiled near the fire. You fill your container carefully and seal it. Before heading back, you listen to the forest. A distant cough like cracking ice echoes across the trees. It is only a branch breaking, yet it reminds you of how winter illnesses often began quietly. A scratchy throat, a chill that refused to fade, a cough that grew louder over nights. In the wilderness, even a mild sickness could darken the mind and drain strength. Inside the cabin again, you close the door and kneel near the hearth. You strike a flame and coax a small fire to life. The warmth spreads slowly, crawling across the room and warming the hide under your knees. You place the pot of spruce tips near the flame and stir it gently. The steam rises in light wisps, carrying that clean, resin-rich scent. The dog lifts its head and sniffs the air curiously. A faint memory surfaces. Some old winter healers believed that a cabin filled with the scent of spruce or pine kept sickness at bay. Whether that belief came from tradition or simple comfort is uncertain, but the rising aroma now certainly brings a sense of ease. You sit beside the fire and reflect on earlier efforts. Your clothing, the chinking, the insulation, the snow walls outside, all of it protects your body. But true winter survival requires guarding what remains unseen. The rhythms of breath, the warmth of skin, the quiet pulse beneath your wrist. You unwrap your mitten and check your fingers. No pale spots, no numbness. Good. Frostbite often comes silently. Mountain men wrote about fingers turning white without warning. They advised warming them slowly near the fire, never rubbing too harshly. You follow that advice now, warming your hands at a safe distance. The heat tingles gently through your fingertips. Next, you check your toes, pressing them through your boots. They feel warm enough thanks to the grass lining. If the cold seeped in, you would remove your boots and warm them beneath your cloak. A trick you learned from an old description of winter nights, when trappers hugged their legs close to their bodies to keep circulation flowing. You sip the spruce tea when it's ready. Its taste is sharp and refreshing. It warms your throat and spreads comfort slowly through your chest. You close your eyes and take a deep breath. Winter illnesses rarely disappear instantly, but small habits like this strengthen your defenses. Outside, the wind hums again, low and steady. The dog shifts closer, resting its head on your knee. You stroke its fur, feeling the warmth beneath your hand. The animal's presence grounds you, reminding you of how mountain men relied on this quiet companionship to stay emotionally steady through the long, isolating nights. You gather the small pouches of herbs and store them neatly in a corner. Each item feels like a promise, something to soften pain, ease discomfort, or steady your breath. You look at the clay pot of spruce tea and drink again. The warmth spreads deeper now, curling old aches out from your shoulders. Your mind drifts briefly to a question that modern researchers often explore: whether frontier healers truly understood the chemical properties of the plants they used, or simply learned by repeated trial and error. Perhaps it was a mix of both. Humans learn by listening to the land, and the land teaches in its own deliberate way. You lean back against the wall, feeling the slow warmth of the fire bloom through the room. Your dog dozes peacefully beside you, chest rising and falling in a steady rhythm. You sip your tea one last time, then set the pot aside. Winter will test your body again, through cold mornings, long nights, and moments when fatigue creeps unexpectedly into your bones. But now, with these small remedies gathered and understood, you carry the quiet confidence that you can tend your own health, just as mountain men once did. Outside, the forest murmurs under the growing storm. Inside, the hearth glows with rising heat. And for now, with your small collection of winter medicine at your side, you feel ready for whatever challenges the season sends next. You sit quietly beside the fire, letting the warmth soak slowly into your hands. The spruce tea lingers on your tongue with its sharp, calming flavor. Your dog sleeps in a soft curl near your knee, its breath steady, its presence grounding. Outside, the wind hums against the cabin, brushing the walls with patient intent. It has not yet risen into a full storm, but you can feel the shift happening. Winter gathers itself like a great animal preparing to move. And as the day fades into evening, your mind turns towards something mountain men understood better than most people ever will: the long nights. Winter nights in the mountains stretch far beyond the simple absence of daylight. They feel deeper, heavier, shaped by silence that seems almost physical. For men living alone in these wild places, the darkness brought countless hours of reflection, hope and fear, memory and imagination, dreams that came alive in firelit corners. You lift your head and look toward the window gap. Outside, the sky dims. A faint glow rests on the horizon, snow clouds swallowing the last hints of sun. You add a small piece of wood to the hearth. The bark sputters softly before catching flame. The fire brightens, filling the cabin with warm amber light. Shadows dance across the logs, bending and stretching like living shapes. You lean back and close your eyes briefly. The fire's crackle reminds you of countless stories told by travelers who survived these winters. They described how the world outside seemed to fall away each night, leaving only the whisper of their own breath and the low hum of the fire for company. You shift, making yourself comfortable on the hides, then gaze into the small flames. Night has a way of expanding thoughts. Out here, in the quiet of the forest, your mind drifts freely. You think about the mountain men who wrote of these long nights in the simplest terms, yet hinted at something profound beneath their words. Some spoke of nights feeling so long they stretched into memory itself. Others described a strange peace that came from the darkness, as if the world allowed them time to breathe more deeply than daylight ever permitted. You sip the last of your spruce tea and let the warmth travel down your throat. The room smells of wood smoke, hide, and faint pine resin. The combination feels ancient, as though it has drifted through countless winters and carried the memory of each one. Your dog lifts its head and stretches, then moves closer, settling beside you with its chin on your thigh. Its presence warms you in more ways than one. Companions like this softened the edges of loneliness during these endless nights. Mountain men often wrote of talking to their dogs or pack animals when the silence became too wide. Not because they expected answers, but because speaking aloud anchored them to the living world. You run your hand through the dog's fur, feeling its thick underlayer shift beneath your glove. The steady contact brings a sense of comfort. Outside, the wind grows slightly stronger, brushing snow along the ground in faint, whispering trails. The noise blends with the fire's crackle, creating a quiet rhythm that fills the space without overwhelming it. In many preserved winter journals, trappers described how storytelling became the heartbeat of the cabin at night. They spoke aloud to themselves, recited memories, or imagined tales inspired by the wilderness. You are not immune to that instinct. Your thoughts begin to wander, shaping stories of the forest around you. You imagine the trees as ancient guardians watching their own long lifetimes of storms and seasons. You imagine rivers whispering through frozen cracks, telling tales of summer waters. You imagine the mountain itself dreaming beneath the snow, patient and eternal. You lie back slowly, resting your shoulders against the hide. The ceiling beams loom above you, steady and silent. Your gaze drifts over the gentle curves of the wood. The firelight flickers across them, making the shadows tremble like distant northern lights. The dog shifts its weight, curling tighter against your side. Its warmth eases the chill in your legs. As your eyes adjust to the dimmer parts of the cabin, your thoughts slip toward the nature of time in winter. Nights stretch so long that the line between waking and dreaming becomes uncertain. Mountain men wrote of drifting into half-sleep while listening to the wind. Their thoughts traveled far from their cabins, wandering through distant memories. Some remembered families left behind. Others pictured distant trails or past journeys. A few described dreams so vivid they felt more real than daylight. You close your eyes, letting your breath settle. The sounds around you blend together into a soft lull. A distant crack echoes from the forest, then fades. The fire sighs quietly as it shifts against its stones. Your dog's breathing deepens. All of it wraps around you like a blanket made of sound and warmth. A faint memory from a book of mountain folklore surfaces. The elders once said that winter nights invited dreams shaped by the land itself. Not warnings, not visions, but reflections of your own spirit resting in the quiet. They believed the mountains listened when humans slept, that the darkness held your thoughts gently, returning them in the morning shaped into something clearer. You do not know if that is true, but the thought settles softly in your chest. You open your eyes again and watch the fire. The flames have grown smaller, a cluster of orange embers glowing at the center. You add another small log, careful not to disturb the calm too much. The log crackles with a faint spark as it catches. The fire brightens, sending warm light into the corners of the cabin. The dog lifts its head briefly, then relaxes again. You stroke its fur once more before turning your attention to the floor. The hides feel comfortable beneath you, warmer than you expected. The layers of grass and bark cushion your back, insulating you from the cold earth. You pull your cloak loosely over your legs and settle into the warmth. The long night begins its slow rhythm. The sound of wind, the breathing of your companion, the soft glow of the firelight. You rest your hand on your chest and feel your heartbeat steady and calm. Out here, with no clocks, no lantern glass, no city noise, night becomes its own world. Deep, slow, thoughtful. You sense it unfolding around you like a vast, quiet landscape. Your thoughts drift to the usefulness of these long nights. Some modern scholars of wilderness history suggest that mountain men developed a kind of internal pacing during winter, a slower rhythm of thinking, planning, and reflecting. They used these nights to prepare mentally for the season's demands. You feel that now. Ideas gather softly in your mind. Gratitude for the shelter you built, awareness of the storm creeping closer, confidence in your preparations. The dog shifts again, curling closer still. You rub its ear gently, feeling the soft fur between your fingers. Its body warms you more than any blanket could. Many trappers wrote of nights like this, where both man and animal survived together through shared heat and quiet trust. You lie back fully now, resting your head on a folded hide. The firelight dances in your peripheral vision. The embers pulse in a slow, glowing heartbeat. Outside, the wind whispers across the clearing, not yet angry, simply moving with intention. You take a deep breath, then another. Your eyes grow heavy. The long night stretches before you, ready to cradle your thoughts. And for the first time in many days, you feel your mind slip gently into a state of calm that only a winter cabin can provide. Here, in the quiet with the fire beside you and the dog against your ribs, the world feels peaceful. The long nights may test you, but tonight they welcome you with quiet arms. You wake slowly, drifting up from a warm and dream-softened place. The fire has burned down to soft red embers, glowing like sleepy stars scattered across the hearth. Your dog lies curled against your hip, its breath steady and warm. The cabin sits in deep silence, the kind that only comes after a long night of steady snowfall. You blink a few times, letting your senses return to the waking world. The air feels different today, calmer, heavy yet peaceful. You stretch beneath your cloak and feel the gentle ache of muscles that have worked hard through many days. You sit up and listen. Outside, the world seems hushed, almost reverent. No wind rattles the bark shingles. No shifting branches groan under the weight of ice. Just a soft, even silence, like the forest has wrapped itself in thick blankets. You rise, brush your hand along the dog's fur, and step toward the door. When you open it, the world greets you with a vast sheet of white. Snow blankets the clearing in smooth, untouched layers. It hangs from branches like pale curtains and wraps the ground in gentle waves. Everywhere you look, the landscape holds the soft glow of early morning light. The sky is a quiet grey, but the world below it shines in the soft, diffused brightness of freshly fallen snow. You draw in a breath, letting the cold slip into your lungs, crisp and sharp. A memory drifts through your mind. In many old winter journals, mountain men described mornings after heavy snowfall as tests of patience and design. Their cabins faced the strain of shifting weight, melting edges, rising moisture, and subtle movement beneath the logs. Today, you must check your home with the same focused care. You step out into the drifts, your boots sinking until you feel resistance. Snow presses up the sides of your legs, packing tightly around your calves. It is deeper than yesterday, but not so deep that it threatens your walls. You start by examining the roof. Snow sits thick across the bark and spruce boughs, but the angle of the roof has done its job well. The weight distributes evenly. Still, you take your long pole and guide some of the heavier patches downward. They slide off smoothly, falling in muffled thumps that vanish quickly beneath the accumulating drifts. The shrubs and fallen branches you placed near the north wall are now half buried, their shapes softened by snow. You press your glove into one drift and feel its firmness. Good. It acts like an insulating sleeve now, keeping cold wind from hitting the logs too directly. You circle the cabin slowly, checking the chinking between the logs. Moss remains tight in most gaps, though one upper seam has shrunk slightly from last night's deep cold. You take a small tuft of dried grass from your pouch and pack it gently into the space, pressing with your thumb until the draft disappears. Small maintenance like this is the quiet backbone of winter survival. Mountain men understood that problems did not arrive with roaring sound or sudden catastrophe. More often they crept in as small leaks, tiny drafts, almost invisible weaknesses that grew under neglect. As you continue along the back wall, something pulls your attention. The earth beneath the snow feels uneven. You scrape a section clear and reveal a shallow bulge in the soil. It shifts when you press it. This is the edge of the spring thaw beginning its slow rise. Not a danger yet, but a reminder of what will come. Spring changes everything. Snow melts. The ground shifts. Logs settle. Homes creak, tilt, and sometimes crack. You kneel to inspect the bulge more closely, your glove brushing aside the soft powder. Beneath the thin layer of snow, the soil glistens faintly with trapped moisture. In many writings passed down through generations, old trappers noted that spring was often harder on cabins than winter itself. The freeze held everything still. The thaw made everything move. Scholars who study frontier structures still discuss how early builders coped with this movement. Some believe they deliberately left small gaps at the base of the cabin to allow the soil to swell and shrink. Others suggest they built on slightly raised platforms of stone. Your own cabin rests directly on packed earth, so you must watch the ground carefully in the coming weeks. Your dog trots toward you, its paws sinking into the powder. Snow clings to the fur around its legs in clumps. It stops beside you and shakes violently, sending a glittering spray into the sunlight. You laugh softly, the sound warm even in the morning chill. The dog's presence adds a gentle comfort to the cold air. You rise again and continue your round. When you reach the south side, you notice a thin trickle of meltwater running beneath a cluster of stones. This early melt does not threaten the cabin, but you know that once the sun climbs higher in the season, such water can pool and soften the ground beneath the foundation logs. You push snow away from the stones, allowing the trickle to run free rather than gather near the wall. Next, you check the chimney. Snow clings lightly to its crown, but the stones remain stable. You test the mortar with your glove, pressing gently. It holds firm. A good sign. A storm can shift stones, but last night's snow seems to have settled without pushing anything out of place. With the exterior checked, you head back inside. You close the door behind you, sealing yourself in a chamber warmed by thin sunlight filtering through the window gap. Your breath curls in misty swirls. You kneel beside the hearth and build a morning fire. The spark catches quickly, thanks to the dry kindling you stored near the wall. Flame blossoms upward, casting orange light across the room. Your dog circles beside you, eager for warmth. You smile and let the heat rise. Sitting near the fire, you feel the change in the cabin. The walls hold the warmth longer now. The floor stays comfortable. The roof muffles sound more heavily with its blanket of snow. The space feels tighter, quieter, almost cozy. You sense the shift both inside and out. The cabin no longer feels like part of winter's dominion. It feels like the fortress you built with your own hands. Your mind drifts to the emotional weight of spring for the early mountain men. Many letters and recollections describe the thaw not just as a season but as a test. Would the cabin survive shifting earth? Would meltwater seep beneath the walls? Would the roof hold against the heavy dumps of late-season snow? You understand their concerns now. The snow that shelters you can also undo you if ignored. You sip a mouthful of warm water and lean back. The cabin creaks softly, a gentle groan of settling logs. You close your eyes and listen. The fire crackles. The dog sighs. Wind whispers outside. The night storm has passed, leaving the world in a hushed glow. Then you rise again to inspect the interior floor. The hides remain dry. The bark beneath them holds firm. No moisture seeps upward. No cold drafts crawl from under the walls. Another quiet victory. You kneel and rest your palm on the ground. It feels steady. You walk one more slow circle inside the cabin, checking every seam, every corner, tracing the lines of the logs with your fingertips. Everything holds. When you return to the hearth, the fire burns steadily. The dog rests with its head on its paws, eyes half shut. You sit beside it and let the silence settle. Outside, the world shines beneath the soft weight of new snow. Inside, your home stands ready for whatever the thaw brings next. This season has not finished testing you, but your growing shelter meets each challenge with calm and quiet strength. You stay seated beside the hearth for a few peaceful breaths, letting the warmth wash across your hands and slowly ease into your shoulders. The fire glows steadily now, its light settling comfortably against the logs. Outside, the world rests under a thick quilt of snow, the storm's voice softened into near silence. The dog lies close, curled with its nose tucked into its fur. This cabin, built log by log and shaped by so many careful choices, finally feels whole. You rise, stretch your arms, and walk toward the door, knowing it is time to reflect on what this shelter truly represents in the wilderness. You open the door gently. A cool rush of air brushes your face, but the cold feels familiar now, no longer threatening. Snow glitters beneath the muted daylight, untouched except for your own footprints looping around the cabin from earlier. The world seems calm, with only the faint rattle of a distant branch shifting under ice. You step outside for a moment, feeling the snow compress beneath your boots. The cabin stands solid behind you. Its walls hold firm. Its roof lifts confidently toward the pale sky. Its chimney rises straight and purposeful. You absorb the sight and breathe deeply. Mountain homes were not monuments. They were not built for beauty or pride, though beauty often grew from their simplicity. They were proof of endurance, evidence of the quiet partnership between a person and the land they tried to understand. And every log you lifted, every stone you placed, every seam you sealed has shaped a shelter that echoes the way frontier families and lone trappers once lived here long before your footsteps touched this clearing. You walk slowly around the cabin, brushing your glove along the chinked seams. The moss and bark you pressed into the gaps hold strong. The snow that gathered at the base forms a natural shield, hugging the structure like a winter coat. The lattice of branches along the north wall, once just a simple barrier, now serves as a strengthening layer between the cabin and the storm, proof that small choices matter just as much as larger ones. As you inspect the cabin, you recall something you read in a collection of stories passed between old mountain families. They wrote that shelters built in winter held a special character, as though the cold shaped them more carefully. Spring cabins, those built when the world was gentler, lacked the toughness found in winter wood and winter mines. Whether that belief was practical truth or simply the pride of hard living, you cannot say. But standing here beside your own winter shelter, you understand how effort shapes meaning. You return inside and push the door closed behind you. The familiar hush of the cabin settles over you again. The firelight flickers softly, the shadows shifting across the log walls like gentle waves. Your dog wakes briefly to watch you, then lowers its head back onto its paws. You kneel beside the hearth and hold your hands near the warmth, letting heat seep into your blood. Your mind drifts through the memory of every step that brought this place into existence, choosing the land, reading the trees and soil, swinging the axe until your arms burned, shaping beams, stacking stones, chinking gaps, raising the roof, insulating the floor, steadying the chimney, contending with snow's behavior, learning from the forest, listening to the night, gathering wisdom from distant travelers, caring for yourself and your companion. Every piece of the journey binds itself to these walls. You know, too, that historians continue to discuss how the first frontier shelters influenced the later architecture of mountain communities. Some researchers believe these early cabins formed the foundation of regional building traditions. Others argue they were temporary structures meant only for solitary survival. Both perspectives hold pieces of truth. Perhaps the legacy lies not in the structures themselves, but in the ideas that shaped them: ingenuity, patience, respect for the seasons, care for the land, willingness to learn from hardship. You take another slow breath. The cabin feels warm enough now that you can remove your gloves. The hides on the floor cushion your knees, and the faint mix of smoke and pine lingers in the room. You run your fingertips along the wood grain beside you. It feels smooth in some places, rough in others, alive in every inch. A quiet sense of accomplishment settles into your chest. You turn your head toward the window gap. Outside, daylight has softened into its late afternoon shade. Snow glows faintly under the dimming sky. You can almost imagine how the cabin will look in spring, when melting snow reveals new ground, and green shoots break through the frost. The walls may shift slightly, the ground may swell, the roof may settle, but the cabin will endure. You lean back on your hands and close your eyes briefly, letting the heat of the fire settle across your face. The long nights, the cold winds, the work-worn hands, the careful listening to nature's quiet voice, all of it brought you here, and now the cabin stands as quiet testimony to your determination. It is not perfect. No mountain shelter ever is, but it is strong, and it is yours. Your dog rises, shakes its fur, and steps closer. You rest a hand on its shoulder. Together, you sit before the fire, sharing warmth in a space shaped by effort and patience. Outside, snow begins to drift lightly once again, soft as a whisper. Your gaze rises to the ceiling beams. You admire their lines, the way each one rests securely on the next. This home, simple and rugged, reflects the lessons mountain men carried through countless winters. Build smart. Listen to the land. Protect what matters. Trust your instincts. Respect the cold, and take warmth wherever you can find it. You inhale deeply, feeling the heat expand through your chest. The cabin stills around you, peaceful and strong. The long journey that began in a frostbitten clearing now finds its quiet resting point here, beside a fire that glows softly against stone. You exhale slowly, letting the warmth settle deeply into your bones and your mind. Now let the breath soften. Let the cold outside become distant, muted, almost imaginary. You sit inside your finished cabin, the walls holding the last light of the fire in their grain, the air warm and safe around you. The dog rests calmly against your leg, a steady rhythm of breath rising and falling like gentle waves. You listen to the faint crackle of the embers. It is slow now, unhurried. A peaceful sound, steady enough to lull your mind into quiet ease. Outside, the forest settles into its own nighttime rhythm. Snow drifts without urgency. The wind lowers itself to a quiet hush. You sense none of the tension that haunted earlier nights, only calm, only rest. Your eyelids grow heavier. The warmth of the room wraps itself around your shoulders, soft and reassuring. Every muscle begins to loosen, letting go of the day's work. The long story of the cabin, with all its cold mornings and careful decisions, fades gently into the background. What remains is comfort, a slow, deep comfort that feels safe enough to sleep in. You stretch your legs beneath the cloak and nestle deeper into the hide-covered floor. The gentle scents of pine, bark, and faint smoke drift pleasantly through the air. Your breathing slows, matching the slow pulse of the fire's last light. The world outside continues, but it does not need your attention now. The storms can wait. The forest can wait. The snow can fall without hurry. In this moment, all that matters is warmth and rest. Let your thoughts grow soft. Let your breath smooth itself. Let the quiet of this winter cabin surround you completely. Sweet dreams.